Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty With It with your host, Yuri Wallach, my partner in crime as always, Vasily Giannarakos. Vasily, what's going on, buddy?
Doing well, Yuri. It's really our most anticipated episode of, I would say, the year typically for us, with
Yeah.
our, draft preview here. So I'm excited. It's going to be a fun one. We got a great guest. I'll let you cue Steve in here, Yuri.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, for those of you who are not aware, I don't know how you're not at this point, but welcome back to the show, Steve Cornianos. He is the founder, the lead man, and also does all things scouting at the Draft Analyst. He is the Draft Analyst. Steve Cornianos. Steve, welcome back to the show, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's definitely a highly anticipated episode, and I hope everybody brought their notes with them, or not their notes, but like some paper and a pen, or if you're old school like me, or you got your phone ready and or you're recording, or just going to subscribe to the channel, because this is going to be a big one, and we're going to cover everything.
Yeah, I'm so pumped. We're pumped. Obviously, people have asked about you quite a bit. When are you coming back on the show? And obviously, we mentioned this already. We're going to do a post draft show, which will be a lot more focused just on the players, which will probably build on what we've done here already. But yeah, feel free to watch it again. Like Steve was saying, watch episode twice. You don't retain everything on the first drive.
Yeah,
that's for sure. But yeah, this is a perfect episode to lead us up to the draft. We're about 2 weeks away now. Under 2 weeks away. So we're like right around the corner. We wanted to make sure you guys had this with time to digest it before we go into the draft. And there's going to be a lot of questioning of narratives, as typical with this show and typical with Steve on here. And that's what's one of the reasons we love Steve outside of his knowledge. He just fits the tone of the show so well. All right, let me do the opening spiel, and then we'll get right into stuff. We're going to start off with the Flyers press conference first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Shabanov, and then the entire segment after that is going to be all draft. So if you guys are not interested in the press conference stuff, though I will say it's going to tie into the draft, we're going to recap that. You can skip ahead, but I would recommend starting at the beginning. So just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notification to get notified when we release these episodes. Could be kind of random, so it helps quite a bit. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a follow as well. That is the best way to support this podcast. Also, want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company and make sure you get the best claim possible. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. The link is in the description for both the audio and the video versions of this podcast, SportsSpider.com. All right, let's get right into it. So today we had a press conference from Danny Briere and Brent Flair. This was a pre-draft press conference. Luckily landed on the morning before we record this.
Yeah, we're saying it's perfect. Right?
Yeah.
We're talking offline, me and you, even we're saying it's hilarious that it landed subsequently, on the morning we're doing this show. It really ties into everything we want to talk about. So
yes, and luckily for us, they don't like give us information the next day or something. You don't have to release this. So, okay, Briere talked about a lot of stuff. I have some stuff highlighted here. We can add additional stuff, Facility, especially. I know you have some topics broken down as well. The first thing I want to talk about is how they mentioned how difficult it is to find a center. We know the Flyers' current top need. They mentioned it themselves. It is at center. Everybody's aware of it. They lack a true number one center, or even a guy who is capable, at least, of playing against the best players on the other team every night. It was Sean Couturier 2 years after back surgeries. He has not been the same player he used to be, though that could be changing. We've talked about that in the future. And they obviously have Jet Luchenko in the system, but they lack that true polished potential 80 to 100-point guy. And they talked about how difficult it is to find a center. So clearly, what my takeaway is that they are focused on a center in this draft. They are looking for somebody who can play down the middle, at the very least in a top six capacity, but really a guy who can play against the best players in the on the other team. It's not going to be their only opportunity to grab a center, but clearly this is a big focus for them, and they know where it needs to be. But so I'll let you open up first, and then Steve will let you comment with your perspective there.
Yeah, sure. So I have the quote from Briere. He basically said, in pertaining to the question about, will the Flyers potentially trade for a young roster player, in particular center, he stated, we've had a few talks with different teams. We realize the area of need is center. Teams don't really want to move centers unless it's a fourth line guy. And to your point, Yariv, right, that kind of spells out your line of thinking. A lot of teams around the NHL don't really want to move centers in trades. It's a very premium value position. Most teams aren't looking to, move a center that is a top line type of center for them or a top six type of center. And where the Flyers are, and just the fact that if you're looking at the potential prospects that will be available at 6, right, there is an opportunity to grab a high-end center, perhaps. We'll have to see how the board, eventually shakes out. But to me, with 3 first-round picks, I think, and the need, obviously, at center with the depth kind of lacking, even though during the press conference he mentions like a Berglund, a Ruhonen, Cole Knuble, some guys in the system, those aren't necessarily prospects you could project in that, middle 6, even top line center type of range. Probably guys that might, top out at being third line centers in the NHL or even fourth line centers. So, long story short, I do think the Flyers are probably going to target a center with at least one of these picks, most likely. So what's your thoughts, Steve, on that?
Without a doubt. Briere is not mince words. He is, like you said, he is not just this press conference. At the end of the season press conference, he said it. And last year they drafted, was it 4 centers? Was it Ruhonen, Berglund, Luchenko, and I think I'm forgetting one more.
Yeah.
So clearly it's a thing. Now, the problem is that you could either do one of two things, right? When you're trying to build a winner, a contender, whatever. You could either build and then add a center, or add a center and build around it, right? So usually the teams that build around the center are ones that stink, get one high in the lottery, right? Like, Taves, Backstrom, Crosby, Malkin, like that's a real Kopitar in the Kings. The other way you can do it is you just add defensemen and you add like goalies, and you build on, like, what, we need that one piece. And I always use you could use the Lindros as an example, but really for me, it was Mark Messier with the Rangers. And obviously I'm speaking because I'm a fan, but that team had so many issues, and they drafted great. They had great young players and they had great goaltending and everything, but they missed that one guy. And because they had all these assets, they were able to pull it off. Now you need the circumstance for that to happen, right? And fast forward to 2025, we saw with Vancouver and JT Miller. Now, is JT Miller the kind of guy that the Flyers should, if he wasn't on the Rangers, let's say like he having his issue with Vancouver, would the 2025 Flyers pay to get a guy like JT Miller? Would it be worth it? I don't think so, because they're not yet really showing signs that they are arriving. Not yet. Okay. We saw a little bit of it, but we need more consistency. I'm talking like kind of like what Montreal did this year, or maybe what New Jersey did a couple of years ago, Ottawa, where like you have that playoff spot. You suffered the embarrassing loss or the deflating loss. Now you're a 95, 100 point team. Oh, you got knocked down the second round. What are our missing pieces? So the Flyers situation right now is they have cap space, right? I mean, look at Nashville last year with Stamkos. I mean, they have cap space, but this is a situation where they need to draft, just like they did in 2003 with Carter and Richards. And if you look at how the Flyers have, when they're successful, or the successful center picks that they've had, they really weren't these freaking like high profile guys, right? Giroux was listed as a wing,
2022, right? In that draft.
Yeah, small guy. But he was a good, what does Briere talk about? IQ and work ethic and competitiveness. Obviously Giroux had a ton of that. You didn't win with Jay O'Brien. You didn't win with Rutsov, but you look at like Lawton, right? Couturier was knocked in his draft year. He was supposed to be a top 2 or 3 pick.
He fell because of the mono, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that and they said, oh, his skating is ugly and all this, and it's like, all right,
Think about the defensive IQ and what really, is like a prominent feature of his game. So.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that draft is that draft was horrific in retrospect for forwards. He was literally the shining. He and Forsberg, and there might be a couple others who, as out of the forwards go. So, the Flyers don't really need a number one overall pick, but I think this year's particular, they might get that guy. They might get that guy if they don't get it. If they didn't get it last year with Luchenko, I really think they're going to get it this year at 6. So
love that. Yeah, and again, it's a forward heavy draft. They have several first round picks.
Several centers in the mix there too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, a ton. They might in theory they could walk away with 3 potential number 1, no worse than number 2 centers before they hit like the 50th or whatever the third second round that they have. I mean, it's that's why. And remember also they could also move up too. And
just think about the picks they have, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, you tell me if you were a team like Colorado, you have like 2 prospects, or not Colorado, but let's say a team like Colorado with a thin pipeline, like Winnipeg, for example, they always have their first round pick, but they've drafted the fewest amount of players in the last 5 years, only 24, but they always retain their first round pick. So you tell me Sheveldayoff is going to be like, no, I don't want 3 second round picks, hypothetically speaking, if that's what they offer. So, yeah, it is a great, great position to be in for the Flyers. Enviable. Like any team would want to do this. They're not an embarrassing team. They're a bubble team. But to have this many assets is so early, and we'll get into the quality of the draft, but it is not a bad draft. It is average at worst.
Okay.
Yeah, and
7 picks.
How would you call a center heavy and a goalie heavy draft weak? It's like saying, the quarterback, there are a lot of quarterbacks, but it's a weak draft. Like, no.
Well, we're gonna talk about that. I definitely have a theory of why they do this. Sorry,
7 picks, right, in the first 2 rounds. Like, just think about when teams usually don't have that many picks in the first 2 rounds like that.
No.
So
it's pretty rare.
Like Colorado back in was it 98? They had 4 first round picks while they were a freaking contender, and they really nailed. I think they nailed 3 out of them. So yeah, it's not
very rare. That was like 20 years ago.
Yeah,
almost. So yeah, it does kind of align with what you were just saying. And Briere talked about the disappointment of dropping back, how he was initially disappointed the night of the lottery draft drop, and we all were, and I was too, right? But then they, again, he does not claim to be the scouting expert, right? He had to kind of take a step back, talk to his team. And after talking to the scouting team and doing his own research based off of what they were telling him, he realized that they have a lot more options than he initially realized.
I could have told him that. Hey, he could have.
Well, you're a scout. That's different.
I could have told him that 6 months ago.
Right, exactly.
For real. No, I'm serious. Like I knew that this was going to be a center-heavy top half of the first round. And
you told us this last year, Steve.
Definitely.
Yeah. I was gonna say, well, we talked about this because we're always talking about stuff in the future. Like,
what's our thoughts on the next year's class?
Yeah, we're always 12 months ahead of a lot of the other podcasts, and I do listen to the other podcasts. A lot of them refuse to listen to podcasts, but I try to listen to whatever.
You got Greek power. You got Greek power.
That's exactly that's what we got.
Hey, we got democracy.
We're also one of the only podcasts who has a goalie as a co-host. So
yeah, there you go.
Dope. So he talked about how
the Flyers interested.
might need one emergency backup, maybe. Yeah. Get me.
Hey, that's pretty cool. He talked about the initial disappointment, but now that they really understand, they kind of have a tier of like 3 to 8, right? Like they do see Schaefer and Misa as number 1 and 2, but between 3 to 8, so even beyond 6, they recognize that there are some names out there that if they walk away from them, they see them all bubbled together. Now, maybe you don't 100% agree with that, Steve, but they said that there's even up to like 15 guys that they're like arguing over right now at this point. So I'll go to you first on Steve, like that initial reaction, right? Like you were just saying, like that. I think that was the common reaction amongst fans. People we don't have strong understanding of the draft. We know the names that are publicized, and that is it, right? So after that range, right, that's pretty much the normal reaction, and then you take a step back, and it's pretty accurate from what you've seen.
Yeah, so it's kind of like 2014, right? Now, I didn't cover 2014. I didn't start covering the draft until 2015. I'm sure I would have went bananas trying to figure out who, in fact, was the number one, right? Because that was a forward-heavy, insanely forward-heavy draft. You had your Bennett's, your Nylanders, your Dreisaitls, Paul Michael Del Col. Just didn't work out for the Islanders, and the Canucks with Vertanen. But really, that was a special. I mean, you had Pasternak at the bottom of the first round. You had Dylan Larkin in the middle of the first round. So I buy it. I buy it that they might have this range or this tier. The only thing I disagree with is that Mies is in a standalone tier. I don't agree with that. And I've documented it, analytical deep dives, you name it. He is just like everybody else. Okay, he had a great statistical season, but I'm not going to repeat what I've been saying pretty much for like 6 months now. So I get it, but there is like, you don't want to overthink it too much. You know what I mean? Like sometimes if you watch a kid in September, then you watch him again in October, and then you see him maybe at the World Juniors or in a tournament, and maybe you wait until the playoffs just to kind of close the loop. That should be enough. And that's something that I really disagree with the NHL scouting community. I have no problem saying it, is that when these kids are done, when their last game of the season is over, I'm done. And my evaluation is done with them. All I got to do is go back and check all my notes, re-listen to some of my podcasts because I forget. And that's it. I don't care about the combine. I don't care about interviews. I don't care about human interest. Oh, this guy's grandfather, poured concrete in the Eiffel Tower. I don't, great grandfather. I don't care about that stuff. I care about how they played on the ice within the context of the team they were on, the coach they had, the way they were deployed, their performance against the best teams in the league, the best penalty kills, the best power plays, etc. So, but again, my job isn't on the line. I'm retired. I'm not like, I don't have people breathing down my neck. So I get it where they want to be precise with the assessment. But again, I mentioned the analysis paralysis. You got to be careful with that. So I think personally that my tier pretty much stops at like 6, maybe 7, right? That there was a lot of recency bias coming out of the U18 worlds with Brady Martin. There's always recency bias coming out of the combine because, this kid he interviewed so well, and he's so polite, and he's in great shape. Like, dude, it's not a game. It's not a game. They're doing push-ups. They're doing push-ups and pull-ups. You know what I'm saying? So I get it. I understand why people need to have that for validation, but that's really not what I do. So my tiers are different. Okay, I think that the Flyers right now, for example, if let's just say hypothetically that they have Cullen Potter within that. Let's say they just love Cullen Potter. He's a freshman at college and he was so dynamic, and look at what he did at the U18 Worlds. He's so fast, and he's got he comes from a hockey family. He's a good kid, yada, 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 right? If they decided to, let's say, take him at 6, that would be a reach, right? Like, it's a consensus reach, but okay, sometimes reaches like that do work out, right? So look at Moritz Seider when he's a defenseman, but everyone went nuts. Pierre-Luc Dubois was a little bit of a reach because he leapfrogged Puljujarvi. It was a good pick. It was smart by Columbus. Now, of course, Dubois has his issues, but he's not Puljujarvi.
In hindsight, yeah,
right.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that the if they lose out on one of their, like, in their tier, like, if they lose out on the guy they really love, there's a good chance that kid's going to be there at 22 or wherever they're picking. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be kids that are going to slip. There's going to be people for whatever reason. Yeah. Every year there's like 2 or 3 kids that slip, and 2 or 3 kids, if not more, that jump.
Yeah, in fact, they have all those picks, right? To your point, they might be able to grab one of those guys they really like that was in maybe a higher tier than some other teams might have had, and you might be able to capitalize there. I think on the tiers and like what Briere said in terms of, being disappointed, obviously that's a natural reaction as fans too, right? We were watching it, seeing it, being like, wow, it would have been nice if they could have picked 4th. Gives you a better opportunity to potentially get, a higher end type of player. I thought his answer was really interesting to that though, where like, most teams from 1 to 5, he was stating that they're technically going to make the decision for them, right? Where a lot of the guys that they probably had in this tier, of 6 or 7 that you're mentioning, Steve, they're really only going to be 2 to 3 guys left potentially when they pick at 6. So ultimately, it might make the decision easier for them, right? Where, to your point, you get into that analysis paralysis where, hey, what if you were at 2? What if you were at 3? Now we have the ability to pick all these guys because they're all still on the board, right? We like 6, 7 of these guys, and it can be tough for scouts to really, hammer in on who they might want or drill down. So I think the fact they're at 6, at least for that reason, for me, I think it's an interesting thing because you don't have that situation where, oh wow, like who should we pick out of these 5 guys? Instead, it's like, well, there's Martone left and Hagens. Who are we gonna pick? Both are really good options. Or there's Desnoyers and there's Martone. Okay, both are good options. Let's get one of them. It's not like, oh, there's 6 guys we need to select from. Who should it be, right? So
and two words. Matvey Michkov. Like
similar
really,
situation, exactly.
7th overall. Like, really, did we really think? Who predicted that Ara freaking Zona is going to take Simashev?
And there's always happens to be like that, though,
and
right? Steve, we're like a team, yeah.
So again, like I didn't know that. Again, I still don't buy the whole thing that we didn't draft him because he wasn't going to come here. You freaking take him and you do a collective with Lindros. That's a thing about that. But anyway, the exactly what you said, Vasily. That this tier, again, people just got to trust me on this one. That first of all, by the way, with all due respect to Michael Misa, right? I saw a list of the 2nd overall picks from. I think it might have started in 17 with Patrick,
okay,
all the way up to Levshinov, and then compare it to the previous 10 years, right? It is night and day. It's not good for the most recent ones, where the number 2 picks, Kako, Patrick, Svechnikov, all right, he's okay. Byfield, Beniers, like these guys are okay, but then you look at the ones before that. You know what I'm saying? 2014, 2011, where you have I think Barkov was 2nd.
Yeah.
Right. So you have Barkov.
He was also a reach.
2014's Reinhardt as well,
who's a great pick.
Reinhardt,
Reinhardt. So you have. That's the one thing where I don't think that with like Misa or anyone that is in that number 2 spot, I really do think that they're kind of like grouped together. But my tier stops, I would say from a center standpoint, my tier stops at Desnoyers, right? So I have Desnoyers at 7. Okay. I have Misa at 6 because I have Bear at 5. I love Bear, but he's a wing. And then Hagens and Frondell 2 and 3 respectively. So, I mean, someone's going to take Schaefer in the first couple of picks. Someone's going to take Martone, I think, in the first couple of picks. So you're going to get definitely an elite top line caliber potential franchise cornerstone guy.
Yeah, Misa will get taken too potentially. So like I think to your point, like there's going to be an opportunity where you have a guy that's projected as a top line type of talent that's going to end up dropping into your lap at 6 essentially. So
yeah, and to even correct kind of what I said when Flair mentioned this, he didn't necessarily say, "Oh, it's 3 to 8." He was kind of like, "Oh, he's like it's kind of like 2-3 to 8." Like
we don't even know if he was being honest. He could be, it was gamesmanship. It could be like
also true, but I take the flub as like being like, yeah, we all know you guys think like Misa is like the clear cut number 2, but we might not necessarily view it that way either.
Fantilli in 23, we all thought he was and it was Carlson.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
So again, the draft is just way too unpredictable. I know there's a lot of betting involved. I know that
sometimes teams fall in love with guys, to your point, right? Where there's just the scouting staff loves him and they end up taking him for that reason, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about size. So Briere, and I think this is related to what we were just talking about. So Briere stated that size isn't a reason they won't pick someone, which right now with the way the playoffs are looping, it's like size. I've been saying this for a while. Size absolutely matters. It's always mattered. What bothered me is people were trying to pretend like it didn't matter. But I also don't think it means that like a player will not get taken by a team because he's too small. It's just they do tend to prioritize, like we talked about Simashev, right? Talk about Reinbacher. Like their value in the draft goes up, right? Guys who are physically mature, big bodies. It's a higher floor for a lot of teams because they recognize that if physically they can handle the game, they can at least be some level of impact player. Where a younger guy, his skill and skating and hockey sense and grit has to offset his lack of size. That's essentially what Briere said. I think this probably lands with primarily James Hagens, where a lot of people were worried that the Flyers would pass up on Hagens. But I think if you look at their approach toward Michkov, like they will not hesitate to go for skill, right? And there aren't just a slew of large bodies, throughout this draft too. There are several guys who are probably fall under that category. And we're going to talk about that like the second half, but I think that's a pretty big thing. Anything to add there, Vasily, and then we'll let Steve.
No, you covered it. You covered it really well. So yeah, go ahead, Steve.
All right. So here's the thing about it. So first of all, I respectfully disagree about the importance of size. Okay. And the reason why is because the numbers are basically 50-50 if you look at the top players in the league. Now, I know everybody's in love with Florida, and everybody's in love with, with the size and the heaviness, etc. But I mean, here we are, one game away from possibly deciding the Stanley Cup final. And the guy that's most likely to win the Conn Smythe, I know they say it's tied, it's going to be a guy who's 5'9" in his draft year. You know what I mean? So like, you don't necessarily need to have everybody big. And then you look at Braden Point with Tampa Bay. Steven Stamkos was sub-5. Stamkos, Kucherov, Crosby, Marner.
For me, the talent outweighs the size.
Jarvis, Bratt, Jack Hughes. Like, go down the list. These guys were all like 5'11", 5'11 and a half or shorter. So if you want to build it, and the other thing about Florida too is, dude, like 3 of their guys were original draft picks. So they went out and they got size. They went out and they didn't draft for size.
Totally.
They went out. Lundell, they drafted for size. Clearly, he was a big center. Barkov, obviously, that was his thing. And Ekblad, all 3 big guys. That's just 3 pieces to an entire Stanley Cup lineup. It's like 7% is guys that they actually developed themselves and drafted. So you could. What my point is that you could have shorter guys and win with them. But but as far as like the issue with whether you're going to prioritize over it, this draft in particular, this is the beauty of this draft, is that if you decide to go with skill, but you take away with size, you can make up for that size with you. And then the Flyers with the extra picks, you can make up for that at the bottom of the first round.
Yeah, exactly.
So in a hypothetical scenario, let's just say that they are in love with Cole Reshny, right? Cole Reshny is just he's basically oh my God, he's everything. And they decide to shock the world and probably piss a lot of people off. But let's just say initially, I love Cole Reshny, by the way. So let's say they decide to take Cole Reshny, they could address, or like they could have they'll have a contingency later in the first round with a guy like Jack Nesbitt, or a guy like Will Horkoff, or a guy like Cole McKinney. You know what I'm saying? Where you might not be getting that elite crazy skill, but you're getting solid two-way play. You're getting size, physicality, puck protection, key face-offs. So this is, again, it is a sweet spot to be in. And the last thing I'll say about size is this. The GM of the Philadelphia Flyers is Daniel Briere, okay? I remember that 96 draft as well as anybody. It was in the middle of the beginning of the dead puck era. The Legion of Doom was just running roughshod over the entire league. Everybody wanted to be like the Flyers, and it was changing the dynamic of the game. We were literally the devil model, the Flyer model, big, strong, heavy. And we saw that's how the drafts were unfolding. But here's Daniel Briere, this little guy out of the Quebec League, and he just lit it up. But everybody was saying, I don't know his size. Go look back at the 96 draft and see who the best player to come out of that draft was. Okay, Chris Phillips, with all due respect, very good NHL defenseman. I think Chara might have been 96, but he wasn't a first. He was like a late round pick. Out of the first round, I'm pretty sure Briere was the best forward to come out of it, and he went late to Phoenix. So if the GM is like, hey, everyone knocked me for my size, and I turned out to be a pretty good NHL player, like a damn good NHL player, I could see Briere, at least in the back of his mind, saying, you know what, is it really that, kind of a big...
Yeah, he might have been the best player in that draft. Like,
he has the highest point per game.
So
yeah, so that's just a consideration. But I do agree that you're going to have size down the middle. There's no way. You're going to need to compete with the big boys. I think when Pittsburgh got Malkin, well, they got Crosby after Malkin, but when they had Crosby that first year, they stunk. It was all like this hodgepodge of like
Malkin and Stahl in there with some size. It's a total different story.
Boom, exactly. Right? Like that, and that is like your 1, 2, 3. And remember the Penguins took a big risk drafting Stahl ahead of Taves, ahead of Backstrom, ahead of Kessel. Because people are like, wait, you're drafting another center, but Shiro, I went back and I read it. I read all the newspaper articles. Shiro said we love his two-way game. This is a Selke caliber guy for his entire career, and it actually looks. They won.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but to that point, that's why the Flyers have guys like Noah Cates and Sean Couturier, right, who are two-way guys.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in their mind, they're like, that's kind of was my thought process is like, yeah, you can afford to take a guy like Hagens, right? Yeah. Like people are like talking about fear of taking a guy. He's not even that undersized, but like that he's not a 6'2", 6'3" guy, with size. So it's like, yeah, but you can complement that, like you're saying, with other players in the lineup, and they can play those gritty moments in the game, especially if they're good, right? And you don't necessarily have to draft them at the number 5 pick in the draft.
I think that's the beauty, though, of like where the Flyers kind of have positioned themselves here, just with all the draft capital, because even if you draft, let's say, a bunch of a certain position, and Briere kind of alluded to this in the press conference, like, hey, let's say we draft 3 centers for some reason, the first 3 picks. Well, we have how many second round picks to address other needs and things like that. So I think whatever you see them kind of do potentially in the first round, let's say they go heavy on a certain position, for example, you might see them do the opposite in the second round with their other picks. So yeah. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, and the last thing that I want to bring up from that presser is the thought process that the Flyers could use all of their picks, like drafting individually all 7 of those picks. A lot of people said it was like extremely unlikely, like it's never going to happen. I think it absolutely could happen. I don't know if that's the most likely. I see like the most likely is drafting 6 of the 7, potentially packaging something to move up. Maybe get another late first round pick, which nobody ever talks about. Like
you package the 2 first to move up for somebody that maybe fell, right? That you really are interested in,
right? Exactly. There's all these scenarios. Steve, I guess I'm going to go to you about this. Like, is it often that you've seen a team with 7 picks inside because it's even early? It's within the
Montreal
top 50.
a couple of years ago.
Did they take all of them? If I remember correctly,
I don't think so. But again, like if they do, you run the risk of a major logjam because all these kids have the same, because the same part of the pretty much the same cohort. Obviously, it differs. I think if it's CHL, you got 2 years. If it's college or USHL or Europe, you could have anywhere up to like, I think Rohonen is like they retain his rights until 2030.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it's like so it all depends. But my opinion is about doing that is I would advise against it. I would say use that pick and buy in the future. So
which he talked about too.
Yeah, that's what you want to do. There's no guarantee, but you always want to have that flexibility, right? Because at some point they have a glide path, right? The Flyers, I'm pretty sure Briere and Jones have a glide path where they're like, these are our benchmarks. This is where we're going to hit. We see ourselves as a 90 win or like 3rd place team. Oh, look, this is the year where the Rangers are really going to be bad because they have all their core is going to be 36 years old or whatever. Like that's how I would assess the league and how I would do my glide path. So, to do that though, you're going to need to always have a stockpile, right? I'm not saying that what Pittsburgh and like Boston did was wrong because they made the playoffs for a very, like, especially Pittsburgh. They didn't give a shit about prospects and picks. Never.
Yeah,
and look
when
how
you have
long
Crosby and Malkin, right?
True. But then again, you look at the Boston Bruins and the Blues. Those are 2 teams that had and the Red Wings as well. They all had very long playoff streaks, almost a quarter of a century. And a lot of it wasn't because of the draft per se. It was because they always had the flexibility. And they just really had really good people working for them. So again, if you're going to use, put it this way, if the Flyers system was in the shape like the Islanders system or the Edmonton system, I'm like, dude, have at it. Yeah, and we saw the Flyers do that the last couple of drafts where they're like, taking little pieces and inserting them it's really for need. They're really not in a position where they have to, like, oh my God, we're in such bad shape at this one particular position. So I would say, like, make the picks, but I would poll the scouts and say, all right, give me like the no shit 5 guys or 15 guys that have to be a part of this organization, and then maybe use the other assets. And even still, if you trade down from this late second round and you get, let's say, a third and 2 extra fourths, that's good. That's a good thing, because again, look at Alex Bump. Look where he was drafted. You tell me Alex Bump is worth a 4th or 5th round pick right now? Hell no. He's worth probably a 2nd round pick, or maybe even higher.
Late first, maybe. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, so he's worth this. I think he's worth a 2nd round pick. That's just my opinion, at least right now. So yeah, the bottom line is flexibility, though. At the end of the day, you really can't do anything wrong. I mean, the Flyers would have to do something insanely dumb, like what Dubas did with the Leafs draft in 2020, which was just ridiculous. I mean, they to this day, not one player from that draft has played an NHL game, and they had like 12 picks. And they ignored size and toughness completely. So that's just like and again,
too much of an extreme for them in that draft, for sure.
It's got to be a well-balanced draft.
Absolutely.
So one more thing about the presser facility, you can bring it up, and then we'll move on to Shabanov, and then we'll get into the draft afterwards. Go for it, Facility.
Yeah, so just to end the press conference, Briere kind of mentioned the media and how they kind of scout, and how it's the opposite, obviously, of what the experts are doing. So I thought it was just really funny, just kind of based on like what we say all the time on this show, right? So Briere mentioned that their scouts have done a lot of work. They've gone out in the field, and watched guys in person, and put together hundreds of draft reports and things like that. And so-called media will watch these prospects maybe 1 or 2 times, and put their lists together and things like that. And he obviously is going to trust the people he's worked with and the scouts from the team. So I think it's just an interesting thing to kind of mention, to kind of end the press conference off. A little tidbit for the fans, just kind of living by and dying by everything the media is kind of putting out there. The teams that are really doing the work here, these are the experts, right? It's not the people that are watching these guys once or twice out of the year and saying, well, they're 5th on the list now because I watched them once or I watched them twice. It's the actual scouting.
I saw them in a tournament, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, there's people that are working for these teams all across the NHL that are going to watch, potential prospects, several different times in person. Those are really, the opinions that should be trusted.
Yeah, and again, just to add to that, this is why we love having Steve on the show, because if you guys are not aware, we're going to talk about his process in the second half. But if you're not aware, like, he literally starts, the one season, plus he sees these guys, and it goes all the way over to the beginning of the year. He's nonstop watching hockey, nonstop watching these guys. So like, the opinions are so different.
Now, I just want to say about that comment about the media and stuff like that. I agree with him to an extent, because it's out of control. It really started with COVID. It's out of control. But there's 3 types of fans. Okay, there's fans that are obsessed with the draft year round. That's probably, like, I'm just going to make a number off the top of my head, like 5% of hockey fans care about draft prospects, not their own prospects, year round. Then you have the people that are realists, I guess, and they're like, my team stinks. It's November. Let's focus on the draft and spend a lot of time tracking the guys. And you have the last group of people, the last group of fans, where they don't care at all about the draft until the season is over, the lottery is over, we know where they're picking, and then they get into it. Now, the problem with that last group is that after a month of research, they think they're experts. And they think that they know everything, and that when someone like myself is trying to be like, nah, listen, we've been following this, like, no.
We have data to back this up. Exactly.
Okay, so now at the same time, though, how many times have scouts written 65, 70, 80 reports on a guy and banged on the table for him, and he never hit? Yeah. Meanwhile, the consensus was like, I mean, look at Dylan McElrath.
Like you said before, Steve, analysis paralysis. Sometimes too much could be bad. So.
Yeah, and this I always bring up Bill Walsh, right? The late great Bill Walsh, Hall of Fame coach of the 49ers, where he was this is actually I don't know if I brought it up in another podcast. I might have said it before, so I'm sorry if I repeat myself. But Bill Walsh had a thing where he didn't he watched the kid once. That was enough for him. And he would tell his scouts, like, hey, this is the kid I want. Just make sure we get him. There's actually a true story that I think it was Bill Walsh, had a friend who was like an actor or like a musician who just happened to be a huge draft junkie. And he would write down, by the end of the year, he would write down a list of the players that he loved. And he would literally give that list to Bill Walsh. And sometimes Bill Walsh would, this is a true story. I'm not making it up. It was in Sports Illustrated from like 89 or 90. It was all about the Niner dynasty and how, and he would, the Niners would, now I don't know how the scouts, I don't know how the scouts felt about this guy.
Probably didn't like him.
He was even allowed in the war room. He was even allowed in the war. This friggin' actor, this random guy. But
he's got the intel, so there you
go. So I don't, but I completely understand Briere's frustration, if there is frustration, because it really screws up the discourse. And like in this situation, you have to trust the evaluation process and what the scouts are saying. Just because if they're saying he's a great player and he's got a high ceiling, they're not wrong in saying that. They'd be wrong if they said this guy's the next Lemieux or this guy's the next Crosby. So that is in a way like a frustration that I have, is that, dude, I spend freaking 330 days a year studying this stuff. Like, this is all I do. This is what I do. And then I got to get into debates with people like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, dude, I got like I audited every single one of Michael Meese's points this year. You know what I mean? Like how he scored it. I broke down 5-on-5 primary assists for like 16 different. Well, I don't use a website to do that. And the other thing is, a lot of these guys, the media, they use the shift by shift videos.
Yeah.
The shift by shift videos, it's a slippery slope because you're not getting the game context, right? When I watch a kid, I'm looking to see about every game. It's momentum swings, right? It's a chess game. This line is playing against this line, this pairing against this forward unit. And so
how do you respond after a team just scored 2 goals on you or something?
The puck talks round the clock, right? The puck is always talking. It talks. It's in one zone. It's in the neutral zone, then back in there. So how is that happening? What is happening for the puck to be in one place and then another place? So if you're watching just a shift by shift video and only 2 of them, what's the context? Was the team on a winning streak? Were they losing? Did they get beat up really bad the last game? Is the kid getting less ice time than the previous game, more ice time? This is why the scouts know this. I know this, but the average fan and a lot of people in the media, God bless them, they really don't. They really, really don't. Unless they put in the requisite work.
Yeah, which I think some do. I think there are some names out there that do, and I think a lot of them don't. I think it's probably Pareto principle, 80-20, 20% of media can probably.
Yeah, like the YouTube videos, like a lot of that stuff is part of probably what he's frustrated about.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it takes the excitement out of their draft picks sometimes, right? Where
exactly
they work so hard to identify this guy and people,
the media blasted him or something. So the
Twitter,
fan base is pissed.
Well, listen, if they make a poopy pick, I mean, it's possible for that to happen.
Is what it is. Yeah. I think that comes with the job too.
But a guy like myself, I get happy. I mean, unless, to be honest with you, the only times I get really, really mad is when the Rangers draft, because they always draft the kids that I don't like. Outside of like 2 exceptions in the last 20 years.
Well, they should probably hire you.
Like the Devils always had me. I was on the Devil website to talk about the draft because I was always complimenting them. And Ranger fans like, "What are you, freaking traitor?" I'm like, dude, I can't help it. They literally draft all the kids that I like. My team did it.
It's just being honest, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so
Flies are in that group too, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that's also why we have you on here, and we force you to pay attention to them extra, which I like too. All right, we want to take a quick moment just to talk about Shabanov.
Yeah.
Vasily and I already stated our opinions past couple weeks on him already. We don't know for sure that he's coming here. We said we have some insight that that it's still positive news, even though there is nothing official. And I did hear Sanfilippo, who's like if you're not aware, Steve, he's like one of the biggest hockey journalists in the area. He said that the Flyers didn't even put an offer his way. We don't know exactly, but we've heard some positive stuff about him coming to Philadelphia still, even though now that decision apparently has been pushed to after the draft and at least like during free agency, so probably after the first like 2 or 3 days until he makes his decision. if he comes over to the NHL in general. But just to give people some insight on somebody who's actually watched Shabanov, somebody who studies the KHL, what can you tell us about Shabanov as a player? We know somewhat of his style, but like overall as a player, and what kind of expectations there should be, if he does come over here to Philadelphia.
Yeah, he's a puck magnet. The puck is always. I mean, he is a great. I remember him playing for Belye Medvedi, and they had a guy. And the reason why I remember him is because they had a guy named Zinoviev, and he had like a big, huge, like curly red. He was a ginger, so he had like a ginger fro, and so you can't miss him on the ice. And I'm pretty sure they were line mates. There's a long time ago. I think it was like 2018 or 2019. But his KHL, he's a little guy. He's not big. He's not big at all.
Yeah.
So I'm not even really. So the skill is there. The production's great. The way I'm looking at it is, with Grabyankin getting, Pautin getting drafted, it seems like the Flyers are trying to create a little bit of a, Russian. And of course you had, Fedotov and Zavragin. It seems like maybe. I'm not going to go as far as to say they're trying to recreate the 97 wings or 95, Russian 5. But I think it's healthy for Michkov, most importantly, to surround him with people, his own people, to
They can feel comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no guarantee. Like, it's like saying like, oh, you're American, let's get along. Like, I know a lot of Americans I don't like, but if I went to like another country and they were them, I'd avoid them. So it's not like it's a guarantee, but he's if he has a willingness to come here, that's a huge deal.
Yeah,
that should count for something as well. That he wants to be a Flyer.
Apparently, this is according to Sanfilippo again, that the Flyers did send Michkov to go talk to him as well. So
yeah,
that's interesting.
We don't know exactly what's going to happen there. Again, we've heard some positive stuff behind the scenes, nothing that we can confirm. Like, people are like, oh, I thought he was coming. Somebody said it to me, and we're like, we don't know for sure.
Yeah, we just have good insight from, that it's potentially going to happen. So we'll see where it goes.
But you're not really like, it's not going to cost you anything outside of just
right. That's the benefit.
Yeah, it's you're maximizing your potential value with the asset, right? Like, realistically, you're not paying anything to acquire him. It would just be a contract. I think it honestly reminds me a little bit of like what Washington did with Ovechkin. Like, think about all the Russians they brought in, like, to surround Ovechkin.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar in terms of that, but so we'll see.
Worst case scenario is he's a Gusev and he goes back home.
Well, yeah, exactly. I was going to ask you, Steve, how do you think his game translates over to the NHL game? Because I was trying, like, people are like, oh, we're going to trade Bobby Brink because we're getting Shabanov, and it's like, right. But I was going to, what I said to people was Bobby Brink would also be a very good player over in the KHL. So,
yeah, I mean, he's like I said, Gusev, I think, was more electrifying, whereas this Shabanov is more calculated. You know what I mean? So although he has dynamic traits, I do think that, like, for example, like blistering wrist shot on his off wing, like puck on a string, like I said, he could like dangle and draw, whereas like Gusev, I mean, he did the same thing. So I don't want to knock Gusev. He clearly had a ton of skill. It wasn't a good fit in North America. He goes back to the KHL. He's a great player again.
Right.
So it's not a bad experiment. Remember, though, like, he's a power play specialist as well, and the power play stinks.
So that's a main factor.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You got Bump. You got the Shabanov. You got Michkov. You got Luchenko. Like, if you want to be Bonk to be the facilitator, fine. I think Shabanov might even be able to run the point.
Okay. I just think him and Michkov together with the power play prowess, that'd be a real
risk because he's a small guy and he's not a defenseman. So, he coughs it up. It's a freaking breakaway. So
okay. So that's essentially what we thought about him. He seems like boomer bust, high skill set, but we'll see if the game translates.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified when we release these episodes. And for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Again, that is the best way to support this show. Assuming that you made it this far, please do that now. If you haven't done that, you're missing out on great content. Again, we're going to have Steve back on. And we're talking about post-draft and then something in the offseason too. We can talk about all the league mess that's going to happen after free agency as well.
That's fun.
Yeah. All right, Steve. This is where we get into the nitty gritty of the show.
No pun intended, or
Right. Yeah.
pun
Pun
intended.
intended. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. So we're gonna get all through the draft. We're gonna go real in depth here. First, let's start off. Give people a rundown of your process, thoughts of the class overall, maybe some trends, just like general thoughts, and prepare people for what we're about to talk about.
Okay, so my process is definitely it's evolved a little bit since when I first started. For me, like I said, I mentioned it earlier. I really track the season more than the as much as I track the player himself. So I need to know the context behind everything, and to do that, it requires a whole year's worth of analysis. So it's not like the good thing about the average draft is that you have a consensus number one, and it's pretty much indisputable, right? Maybe the media towards the end is like, just to kind of create a stir, will say this guy might challenge, but usually we know, right? So we've been lucky with Celebrini last year. We had it with Bedard. Didn't have it in 2022 or 21, but we knew Lafreniere, we knew Hughes, we knew Deline, we knew we didn't really know with Patrick but like Matthews and McDavid. This year was not really that easy because we didn't really know. Once James Hagens was kind of like taking a while to get adjusted to the college game, and we realized he wasn't going to be Celebrini. So the process then involves more emphasis on the top tier, the top guys, than focusing on so I cover every league. Every league, I have every stream. I don't have Instat. I pay for the league streams. I don't care. That way I get to have everything. I got to watch the full game. It's no hassle. And, I basically take notes. Every time I watch a game, before I watch a game, I write down. It's just like what you guys would do for a Flyers game, right? What do the Flyers do? And every NHL team, what do they do before every game? If you have NHL media, they post the game notes, right? Yeah. The communications department does the game notes, right? Streaks, trends, records, who's starting, did you know, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of try to do that at least at a minimum with 3 games a day, at least 3 games a day. If I'm busy, I could only do 2 games a day. There's definitely always going to be 1 game a day. So that basically and unfortunately, I'm an analog guy. So I do everything on clipboards and loose leaf paper and pencils, and I got to transfer it over to the digital, so I can put in the draft report. But so that's basically, now I'm ignoring the NHL. I'm ignoring their discussions. I'm ignoring their press conferences for the most part, because they're not really focusing on the draft until later in the season, right? Once we get into the March time frame, now I'm starting to really think about my overall view of the draft class, because I have 6-7 months of analysis, nonstop uninterrupted analysis. It starts in July. This year, it started at the World Junior Summer Showcase in July, because we had Hagens, Martone, Spence, Hensler.
I remember last season you were saying that, Steve, after our post show, you're like, I'm going to get into the next class, right?
Yeah. And, Pete Krupski did a great job covering it this year. It's always at Plymouth. If you guys want to go, or if anybody wants to go, I suggest it. All the NHL scouts and GMs are there. If you go there, the ticket's $10, $12. You could sit next to all these people because they're all there. And from there, it goes into the Holinka. From the Holinka, it goes into the European seasons. From the European seasons, it goes into the Canadian Hockey League. From there, it goes into the USHL. And then you got college, and there it goes. And you just run with it. And I'm one person. I'm not sharing information with anybody. I'm one guy covering whatever. And I write on my board all the tournaments I got to cover. So it's every month there's 2 or 3 tournaments, except for the second greatest month of the year after December, October. I love October because there are no tournaments. Everybody's focusing on league play. You get to see the kids. Did they make the team out of camp? The A team, if they're European, are they on the top line? What's the power play deployment? And again, this is all annotated, written down. It's evaluated and reviewed at the end of the day. And this basically, like I said, goes on. So now the last thing I'll say is this with rankings. The rankings, like you guys say, mean nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's not the NFL. It's not the NBA. where these kids have to perform immediately. It is a long-term process. I just rank the kids like how I see them and how they perform. Unfortunately, Central Scouting, which I think is obsolete, releases a preliminary watch list with their opinions on what the first round should look like. It's a watch list, and I get it, but where's the influence coming from? A lot of it comes from the CHL, because a lot of those scouts are CHL trained or CHL alumni. So I have a problem with that. But then again, they're usually pretty accurate. I track all this stuff. I track everything the Central Scouting has done. I track all of it. Their hit rate, the 32 kids, they always cap it at 32. It's so stupid. In the early season, like these 32 kids are our first round picks. Don't do that. There's more first round pick options than that. The hit rate is about like 60 to 65% of the 32 that they consider first round prospects. And again, I don't roll that way. I look at a kid, I could see a kid that they would consider to be a 7th round or 6th round kid, and I'll be like, you know what? He was just freaking great. You know what I mean? So no, I'm going to put him in a higher tier. And we have kids like that, they I guess if you want to say kind of shortchanged, or didn't give them enough credit to, and these kids now are in discussion for mid second round, maybe late first round. It's always the case. So that's basically my process in a nutshell. When all the evaluations, the games are done, and I stop watching the kids, I'm compiling my scatter reports. My scatter reports are always 50% season context and production, and 50% how he performs on a regular shift. Okay. I don't care about his knee bend stride. I don't care about his, I used to care about the RVH. I might mention that as like, just for context with goalies, but no, I don't care about any of that stuff. If you remember, my draft report used to break everything down by skating, skill, whatever. At the end of the day, it goes back to what Briere said at the press conference. It ties back to freaking hockey IQ and competitiveness. If those kids have that in spades, there's a very good chance at worst they'll be a really good AHL player. And if they're a really good AHL player, they'll always be right there, in the back of the GM's mind, like, let's give this kid a chance. So that's basically how I view it every year. And I wrap it all up in a draft report, 200 pages. But now I incorporate what the teams are saying and what the teams say at the trade deadline press conferences, what the teams are saying before the lottery. And I'm trying to all tie it in together, right? What do they need? And I make a prospect depth chart. I don't know if you guys could see it. I have the flyer one right here. I don't know if you guys could see it, but this is mine. This is my creation. It's a prospect depth chart broken down by position: left defense, goalie; right defense, left wing, center, right wing. And I list all the contracts and where their expiries are, their ages, and that way I could look at it and say, oh shit, dude, Vegas has no left wings. And this is true. Vegas had no, I was doing the draft. I'm like, dude, Vegas has literally no left wing. They have no left wings in their pipeline. None. Why? They drafted a center with their first pick every year. Literally, when they came to the league in 2017 with their first draft, 3 centers, Glass, Suzuki, and why am I forgetting the third one? But Glass, Suzuki, and another center. And then nothing but, if they didn't have a first round pick, second round pick, they had a second, we're drafting a center. Then last year, what happened? They broke from it and they drafted left wing Trevor Connolly, right? Not only was it a BPA pick, but it was also a need. So this, like I said, this process is year round. My wife is used to it. My daughter's used to it. And I'm about maybe 4 days away from releasing the report. And the reason why I release it 4 days from the draft is because I got to wait for the stupid Stanley Cup finals to finish so I could accurately assess and evaluate and review the 2 teams involved and get the goddamn draft order right. So that's pretty much it. It's a labor of love, but it's always, the whole purpose is to be accurate. It's not about being right. It's about being accurate with the assessment, not the project, not the prediction, not where they're going to end up getting drafted. It's to be accurate with the assessment, to tell as clearer stories you could possibly tell. And that's pretty much.
And I think that's a great thing to end on too, is we're not doing a mock draft here, right? What we're going to do is we're going to go through the tiers where Flyers or the ranges where Flyers have picks, and we'll talk about players around those ranges. We're going to make assumptions,
Yeah.
but Steve might throw some names in that you haven't seen in that range, maybe guys higher or lower than what you think. So be ready for that. We'll talk a little bit, maybe with the 6 overall pick, on how we think that could play out. But for the most part, it's all pointless because we have no idea what those teams are going to draft. So
yeah, it's all about analyzing, right? Like who's the player going to end up being down the line versus, what are they right now? Because a lot of these guys are going to end up developing, into being way better players than they're perceived to be even right now, right? There's always those types of guys that just come out of nowhere out of these
Every
drafts.
year.
So
Yeah, and then you got the human factor too, where like they're going to become rich
yeah,
at a young age.
how do they deal with that? Exactly.
They're going to have a lot more responsibility. They're going to have fans saying, like, poor Zibanejad, not that I disagree with it, his poor wife, like all of them, like this guy's been getting killed. All right. How is that 18-year-old? Slavkovsky is a great example with Montreal. Ryan Bob Slavkovsky, almost back-to-back years where the fans were a little, aggressive
against them.
And Slavkovsky struggled a little bit in the beginning, and the fans were, and Ryan Bacher, the poor kid. I mean, so again, there's a lot to go into it. I don't consider that though. I really can't judge a 17-year-old's makeup or his resilience, like emotional resilience. Like, how the hell am I going to tell that? And even a scout can't even really tell.
How's anybody going to know that? Even like to be honest, even these interviews they have with these kids at the draft,
exactly.
they're all media trained, media prepared for these interviews. They've been preparing for like 4 or 5 months probably for them. Like, first of all, a kid's never going to give you like a legitimate answer in a setting like that.
Yeah,
to really understand his character.
They've been a lot of them have given the questions anyway.
Exactly. So I think the way to look at it is the skill and the talent, right? That's how you do it, Steve. That's the best way in my opinion. So.
Yeah, totally. So again, the Flyers have 8 picks inside the top 68. That's an 11. They have 11.7% of the 68 picks available. So that is a crazy high number for those, just to give people context there. Typically you have a much smaller number. Typically, you come in with maybe 3 picks inside the top 8, right? Now the Flyers have, almost triple that. So it's a much higher percentage of the players being taken. So we're going to have a big focus here. So that is a big part of it. And the thought is we're going to go through this, top 6 range. So we kind of started this already. Steve, I'll list players out, and we can give individual assessments of those players. It's going to get more difficult as we move down the picks. So, but I think the top of the draft, we kind of hinted at already. There are a cluster of players that we can definitely talk about. So the first one, I kind of want to, I'm like tempted to ignore Misa. You already kind of assessed him, but I think the odds of him like dropping to the Flyers are pretty low, even if he does drop.
So he's not dropping.
Yeah, exactly. So he's
best goal scorer in the class. He's the best goal scorer in the class.
Right, exactly. He's going, at the very least, he's going top 3, right? Like there's no scenario where he drops below 3. And odds are he goes 2. So I want to start at James Higgins. I'm going to use Stephen Ellis from Daily Faceoff. I'll use him as a reference, but this is not a reflection of the rankings that Steve is talking about here. I'm just using it to call out names, so I'll probably go somewhat in this order. So the first one we want to focus on, this is a guy that Flyer fans are really hoping dropped to 6. A lot of people think it is ridiculous that he would even be available at 6. Again, you go back a year, he wouldn't have been available at 6 at all, contextually from the media standpoint. Today, now we're seeing lists as low as 8, come out, and that's James Higgins. We all knew the resume coming into this year. Now he has fallen somewhat. I know you're going to be a defender of him already, Steve, but let's break down James Higgins, and we can talk about the scenario at the end of going through these guys of who's most likely to drop here. But give us a breakdown of James Higgins and maybe tell us why Higgins is unjustly criticized at this point.
All right, so right off the bat, he's undoubtedly the best pure playmaker in the draft, without a doubt. There's no comparison. If you want stats, I got him, okay? 50% of his assists were 5-on-5 primary. Nobody in the CHL could touch that. Now, he only had think he had like 26 assists, but again, he was 5-on-5 assists. Yeah, he had 26 he had 26, I think, total assists for the season. But he only played 30-something games, okay, because he was in the college thing. But what did he do the year before that? The year before that, he had a 100-point season with the NTDP. Who had a 100-point season with the NTDP? Oh, Clayton Keller, Jack Eichel, Austin Matthews, Will Smith, Jack Hughes. This is the type of player we're talking about, okay? So he is no like risky or whatever. The NTDP number one center, if you're a number one center with the NTDP and you hit 100 points or close to it in your NTDP season, whichever the last season is, you are pretty much guaranteed to be a 70-point or more NHL center. The only, like I said, Matt Beniers and Thomas Bordeleau, they were not known for scoring, right? They were not known for like electrifying scoring. They were really good, complete to an extent, hardworking, well-mannered, high IQ, like all this stuff. But the dynamic NTDP centers, right? The names I mentioned, they always hit. Tell me a bust. I ask anybody right now to tell me a bust, right? We could start with Larkin, and then it goes to Eichel, and then it goes to Matthews, and then it goes to Keller. That was all in a row.
The data checks out, right? Like when those guys produce at that level for the NTDP.
So now we have Hagens is in that group based on his NTDP production. Then you have the fact that he breaks a very important record. He broke the most points at the U18 World Championships. And who held that record before him? Nikita frickin' Kucherov. So that in itself, those two things in itself, already off the bat, and plus the fact that, like I mentioned, his passing numbers off the bat should make every NHL scouting department think like, you know what? If this kid hits, he's going to be a star. I don't care how big he is. I don't care whatever. So that's the first thing, really the main way that I viewed Hagens. Now, the thing is about his season at Boston College is, guess what? It was a new environment for him. It was new everything. Okay, Will Smith, when he went to Boston College, had completely new line mates, right? He knew of Perreault and he knew of Leonard, but it was a new team, new system, new city, new everything, okay? All these other kids in this year's draft, Martone third year with Brampton, Misa third year with Saginaw, they all were in their cup. Martin, O'Brien, they've all been there. Even Frondell with your Garden. They've all been with the same organization. There was no real discomfort, right? They all knew what to expect. Hagens, so that off the bat. Now, Celebrini had the same, if you want to call it limitation or and he was able to overcome that and have this phenomenal season. So I get that. But at the same time, if you watch the beginning of Boston College's season, they were clearly out of sync. You can't pin that on Hagens. Now, they were winning. They were playing tough teams, right? They played Western Michigan, the eventual champion. They played SCSU, right? St. Cloud State. They had a home and home with Michigan State, freaking the ideal college team, almost like the Florida Panthers of college hockey, except they don't win. But so this is not an easy, let's say, introduction to the college game. But again, at the end of the day, Hagens had a great WJSS, despite being one of the youngest players there. He had a great World Juniors. People could want to freaking cherry pick and say, well, he didn't score. Dude, he had more points than Celebrini or the same amount of points, and he won gold, and he scored a goal in the gold medal game. So, like, what are we really crying about? You can't say,
yeah. Do you think, Steve, it's just the fact that he literally didn't put up like a crazy production-wise season in college, like as a Celebrini did? Like, even
that's not really his fault, though. That's really not his fault. Because if he went to the CHL, we know for a fact. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example about the comparison between the CHL, right, and let's say the AHL. Okay, now when a player goes from the NCAA to the AHL, Alex Bump is a great example, right? Did he do 4 years in college? No, he did not. But he went right to Lehigh Valley, and was he really good looking? Yeah, he was really good looking, right? Did it look like, oh my God, he really has to adapt? And he's not, no, it didn't. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but still, like, you saw a kid, and that is one of, I could use a lot of examples of kids that did that. Now, there's a kid who was signed by the Capitals. I call him the funky technician. His name is Zach Funk. He had, I think he played for Medicine Hat like 2 years ago. I think he was on Medicine Hat. He had like 65. You know what? I won't even go with the fucking technician. Isaac Ratcliffe, right? That kid was a machine.
50 goals.
In the OHL, right? What happened when he got to the AHL?
He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. Yeah.
So think about that. Now, what is closer to the AHL? The NCAA that has players up to 24 and 25 years old, or the CHL where the oldest guy is 20?
Oh, always.
Yeah, it's a
always
great
bring
point.
that up.
And I think that's why it makes him dropping, like the narrative for him dropping is pretty bogus to everything that you're stating, right, Steve?
Yeah.
Like,
but he's not above criticism because remember now Boston College's power play was a major problem. And the problem with it was that it was just out of sync. Now, part of that is the Eagles lost 2 legit insane pieces in Gauthier and Will Smith. So they might have tried to replace Smith with Higgins. They could not replace Gauthier. I know he's like, taboo mentioning his name, persona non grata in Philly, but still the point stands. Like he was the gunslinger from the circle, right? He was the one-time guy. Leonard as well. And then there was a lot of pucks, the puck was being shared properly. What I noticed this year, and again, this is not a knock on Ryan Leonard. I know this is a Flyers podcast, so maybe we could talk a little shit about the Capitals, but Ryan Leonard is a major puck hog. He is a major puck hog, okay? I can't tell you how many times Higgins would be down low supporting the defenseman in the corners, below the dots, engaged physically. What's this other narrative? Oh, he doesn't engage physically. Complete lie. It's a complete lie. He's not going to mash people, but he gets involved, and he gets involved in little battles. He has, let's say abrasiveness. He might mush a guy or slash.
Yeah, the competitive nature's there. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can't tell you how many times Higgins would initiate the breakout by helping the defenseman make a play or making that play himself, the initial chip, and then Leonard just takes the puck and zoom, he's gone. Now, luckily, Higgins is very fast, so he could catch up with that. But usually, I would say and again, I'm just throwing this number out there, but it just the way it seemed watching all his games, that every time there was an entry, it was involving either Perreault or Leonard, the wings, and not Higgins. He was always there for support. Now, when he was entering the zone, we see what he can do. We saw at the World Juniors, was on full display. He's a lateral east-west guy, so he'll weave inside, cut to the middle in, or middle out. He'll go right down the middle. Sometimes, he could get a little overzealous and try to take it by himself 1-on-2, 1-on-3. But Demisa does it. Martone does it. They all do it. So that was a big part of I guess the
narrative.
The maturation or the adjustment to the college game. Like he's got new line mates. Oh, clearly they want the puck. Well, I'm going to freaking give it to him. And the coach knew that. And by the way, the coach started out Jelvik as their center, and then he replaced him and put in Higgins, and Higgins stayed as the number 1 center pretty much 3/4 or almost the rest of the season. The other thing is, and this is something that rarely gets talked about, and I'm assuming it's because people only watch shift by shifts or just watch highlight videos, is Leonard missed like a ton of great wide open chances at the side of the net, from behind the net, from Higgins. Higgins, I would say Leonard, by either hitting the post, missing on breakaways, shooting wide, shanking on shots, I would say he cost by himself. He cost Higgins at least 15 assists, at least, with wide open stuff. Not like, oh, he had a breakaway, like legit, dude, you should have scored your first round pick. You should have scored. And you know how I know he should have scored? Because Leonard is one of the biggest friggin' on ice. He's demonstrative. He's like, always. He's kind of like Crosby in his first couple of years, right? Always complaining and falling, and there's a lot of activity there. So I know Capitals fans are like, no, he's our best prospect. But listen, Higgins could have been better, right? Absolutely. He could have had a no shit, wire to wire, phenomenal Celebrini-esque season, even without the Celebrini points, right? And there was an adjustment period. And really, I don't have a problem saying that Celebrini is a better prospect. And I don't have a problem saying that Higgins is probably not going to score 63 or 65 points next season in the NHL like Celebrini did. That doesn't mean that he's not going to be an 85 or 90 point center down the road. And that's the problem I have with the analysis, because all you're hearing is people like, I don't think he's going to get hurt too easily. That makes zero sense. Jack Eichel is a tank. That guy's played 3 or 4 full seasons out of 10. He's always hurt.
Yeah,
So
I think too, like to your point, right? Like it's not like he went into Boston College, new environment, basically never having to play with these guys before, guys that really weren't giving him the puck, as you stated, and still point a game. So
yeah,
like,
and we already talked about this last podcast how the only players in the last, I think, 20 years to average more than what Hagen's average as an NCAA freshman in his draft year is Fantilli, Celebrini, Eichel. I think that's it. I might be forgetting one. I think Kent Johnson and he might have been tied, but
pretty
Johnson,
good company though.
Johnson was played less games because I think it was like a COVID shortened year. But who did Hagen's outscore? Jonathan Taves, Tage Thompson, Brady Tkachuk. And we heard this narrative with Brady Tkachuk. I know he's a wing. Heard they say, oh, he's not performing like a first top 3 pick should. Guess what? Here we are in 2025, and Brady Tkachuk is the unquestionable best forward to come out of that draft, and name your GM that wouldn't want him on his freaking team right now. So you got to be when it comes to the numbers, you really got to be careful. You got to be careful. You got to look at the whole big picture. But the reason why I have him ranked number 2 is very simple. So he's listed at 5'10" and a half. Artillery expressed it up to 5'11". I think that, and he's going to be up. He's weighing in at about $185.
Yeah,
that's what Crosby was in his draft year.
Yeah.
Like he's going to put on muscle. Who was the Flyer? Frost.
Yeah.
Was I think like 165. He's now listed at 185, 188. Like they're going to put on.
All these guys will put on weight eventually.
Yes, It's not going to be cheeseburgers and freaking milkshakes. Like these guys work out. Like it's so again. I think that Hagen's without a doubt is a future 75, 80 point NHL center. I know that's kind of a ballsy prediction to make, but I'm just really going off of
so you see him as the number 1 center.
Without a doubt.
Okay. I've been hearing a lot of second line center stuff, and that's not what I see. And
yeah,
again, I'm uneducated on this.
He's been a number 1 center his whole life. Why would he stop at the NHL?
Yeah, and that's kind of what was puzzling to me when I heard those denominations, or even of like, oh, he's a second line center. But to your point, like every place he's played, he's the man. He's kind of taking the reins on that team. So that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Like I said, like think about the World Juniors, right?
Yeah.
Briere,
control for that U.S. team.
Mention the World Juniors again. So as much as it bothers me sometimes that it has such a big say, he mentioned about, I think he was saying about Rowan and like, oh, he was really good at the World Juniors. It stays in your mind. Okay. Which first-year draft eligible prospects outside of Schaefer, who played a game and a quarter or in a game and a period or 2 periods, had a better World Junior than James Hagens? Misa wasn't even invited to the damn camp. All right. And it wasn't like, oh, he's hurt. Like there were legitimate reasons why that staff, not Dave Cameron, that staff agreed that Misa was not good enough to, for the most part, agreed to not have him at the damn camp. Martone was there and he was scratched against Germany. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, here's Hagen's top 6 center. Actually, I think he was the top line center, but with those 2 wings, Perreault and Leonard, scored a tying goal. They were down 1-0. He scored the 1-1 goal against Finland. He made some dime passes, the no-look jobs, the one to Boyum. Remember that one? Like this kid was really. But now you got to ask the question: why is he getting all the hate? What is it stemming from? He has not played. He scored the game-winning goal. BC was on the verge of losing to Bentley in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They were going to lose to Bentley, or they were close because it was 1-1. They were about to have overtime, and Bentley was actually playing well. Who scored the game-winning goal to save their season? James Hagens.
I think it's the classic thing, like in terms of just the size factor, even though he's not really that small. To your point, he's like almost like 180 now. And then also just, he didn't hit the ground running like a Celebrini. I think it's the comparison, right? He didn't hit the ground running in college and put up that type of a season. And it's not fair to him, really, at all.
It's not. And that's the thing is he has no real red flags, right? The only red flag that people keep on bringing up is his size, and his size is not a red flag.
Yeah.
It's a measurable, but it's not a red flag.
And in today's NHL, it's not as important as it used to be, in my opinion, either. So.
Listen, we'll talk about guys. I got red flags.
Okay.
I do have red flags.
All right. All right. Well, let's move on from Hagens, even though I very much hope that a lot of teams do pass on him, so he goes to the
Hopefully they
Flyers.
buy into the
Yes,
shitty narrative.
that's what we are hoping for. He is tied for my top choice at number 6. All right, next one is Porter Martone. You mentioned him already. This is a guy who definitely could be available at 6 at this point because of the center heavy draft. We know centers do get prioritized above. Having said that, with the comparisons of the Chuck, which I don't know if they're actually accurate.
No, it's
the
close.
Chuck brother.
Close.
Okay. And the size and everything. Again, not all of these teams drafting at the top are desperate for a number 1 center prospect as well. So we don't really know. Like, he could still go to Chicago. He could, we don't know exactly where he's going. And he is a little bit older for his draft class too, which I think on paper hurts him. But there are arguments definitely against that.
Yeah.
Give us
that late birthday stuff has been debunked. Ovechkin, like Eichel, like I get the conversation. A September 20th guy versus an August 19th. You get that extra year. I think that has more to do with like the contracts though, and
okay,
like as far as like I said, like a lot of late birthday. Austin Matthews, Matt Kachuk.
I think a lot of times it's when you compare like statistical. I think a lot of it is just statistical output. And when you compare guys who are, 8 months apart and one guy is doing a little bit better in the league, and again, I think most people when they don't realize that nothing should be weighted fully, right? It's like you kind of have to put together, like you said, a full contextual narrative of a player, not just is he small, right? Is he big?
Did he score?
Is he older? Can he score? It's like there's so many factors. I think it can hurt, but I think it can also be ignored. I think in Martone's case, from everything I've understood, it can be ignored. But please give us a breakdown of Martone.
I mean, I see him as a really top line NHL wing and an impact wing, well into his career. Not what's going to take him like he consistently. He's got everything you'd really want in a player. His attitude is great. He's a leader. And for a big man, the kid's vision and passing is great. It really is. He's a great playmaker, and I'd put him almost on the same level. I would say he's a better playmaker than Misa, without a doubt. Pure playmaking, pass accuracy, decision-making with his passes. All right, sometimes Martone gets a little bit ahead of himself. All right, but like when I compare Misa versus Martone, right, like there is way more deception. Not way more. I'd say there's a little bit more deception in Martone's passing and vision, because remember, he's a big guy. He's controlling the puck a lot. He's controlling the puck behind the net. He's warding off people. His vision in those scenarios are phenomenal. Misa's vision is very good as well, but he forces a lot of passes and he misses on easy passes. And that was a red flag for me that I noticed early on in the season with Misa. So again, I'm not like just beating up on Misa, but again, I could back it up. I got all the data and all the notes to back it up. But but Martone, to me, he plays with a lot of emotion. And so when that does, he tries to do everything himself. Now, it's common with kids his age. Brampton did not have as good of a season as we thought they should have. Now, they had a lot of injuries. The goalie, Ivan Kovic, the 5'11" goalie that apparently is going to go in the first round, good luck with that. He was inconsistent, very inconsistent. He wasn't stealing. Like, it was the defense lacked like real game breakers. So it was a forward heavy unit, but there were a lot of NHL draft picks on that team. Rekoff, Angus McDonnell, to name a few. So I thought that Martone, as the team captain, was well deserving of that role. He was clutch, but like I said, he has an issue with getting a little bit too excited. A lot of these kids do that, but with him, it was pronounced. And then second half of the season, he went from a 2.0 points per game in the first half to like 1.42 or 3 in the second half. That's more than a half a point a game decrease. And then when you watch the playoff series against Oshawa, I think it was Oshawa. You watch so many playoffs, you forget these freaking teams. But he was mostly a power play merchant, right? I mean, he scored some sweet goals from the dot, slinging wrist shots, top cheese. So the skill is undeniable. So I have him ranked fourth, right? Ahead of Misa, ahead of Bear, ahead of Martin, ahead of O'Brien, behind Frondell and Higgins. I would like, if you asked me, hey, Matt Shaver's out of the question. You know, he's hurt. The teams are down on him. They found like there's controversy, whatever. You know, if a team decided to take Martone first overall, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
I still believe he's not going to drop in the draft. Sorry, Vasily. Go ahead.
No problem. Like in terms of Martone, like he even outproduced, some guys that got drafted last year, like in the top 10. How do you think that plays a factor into like where he goes? Here, do you think teams look at stuff like that? That he outproduced, players even got drafted that were older than him. Does that factor in? Do you think?
So I don't know if I brought this up, but like earlier when about the process, I'm pretty sure right now that every NHL team has the analytics department involved in the scouting process. We've seen Botterill talked about it at his introductory. Well, he actually had like a one-on-one after Seattle hired him. Adams and Fortin with Buffalo talk about it all the time. Tulski, Carolina, the Devils, they all involved. You could tell. I know these kids' stats. I track the stats. I'm not just the guy that go with the eye test. I track the production, and I know like, wow, this guy has 70 points in 25 games, whatever. And so the analytics department is like, I'm pretty sure every team when they're giving their meeting, the meetings are on YouTube. Yeah. So when they show those meetings, they might only show like the scouts arguing. Oh, I really like him, but you're really not seeing the analytics guys being like, hey, no one's talking about this guy right here. He's on Central Scouting's list. Isak Hedquist, right? Overage kid, not on Central Scouting's, any of his rankings, right? He's no 5. Guarantee you the analytics community knows about him. Top line guy for Luleå. They just won the SHL championship. Buzzsaw at the World Junior. Huge production at the J20 level. So you have those conversations, right? So I'd be shocked. I know these old scouts, they're so set in their ways and whatever, fine. All right. But, I think it's better to have, and again, analytics community's got their problems.
But data like that, you got to bring it up, right? Like you got to bring it up. Not to point
the fact that Martone, as a draft year player, was at 2 points a game for almost, I guess like 4, whatever it is, like a third of the season, but that's still impressive. And that the eye test, it matches with the eye test because he is a dangerous one-on-one, strong puck handler. Plus shot. He could score in the breakaway. He's got a great backhand, roofs the backhand, hands in tight, things like that. So to answer your question, I think that the old scouts might say, well, I would have liked to see him perform in this level versus that, where the analytics are like, no, actually, and based on the 5-on-5, numbers that Martone with primaries, Martone ranked in the top percentile along with Desnoyers. It was Desnoyers, Reshny.
That's important, though.
Desnoyers, Reshny, Martone were in the high end. 5-on-5 primaries. O'Brien, no bueno. And like 25% over the bottom percentile. Nesbitt, power play merchant, a secondary assist merchant. So things like that, it has to be discussed.
Interesting. All right, let's move on. Caleb Desnoyers, somebody who has risen quite a bit. We're hearing he won't even be available to the Flyers, even though he was mocked initially by a lot of people as like the most likely to be taken at number 6. He's obviously been a fast riser in the media. Clearly, the Flyers have his brother, so we've been aware of him. The Flyers clearly.
He was always good. He was always a top like 6-7 caliber kid. He didn't come from the middle. I know what you're saying, but
Well, he's getting a lot more noise
now. Maybe would have been a little bit too rich. Let's say in August.
I've seen him at 3 and 4 has been like the most common number, lately. But I think these numbers are irrelevant, to be honest with you, because teams are going to make their own calls. So, go ahead.
So there's a couple of things really helping Desnoyers' profile. Number one is he was a high Quebec League draft pick. I believe he might have been first or second overall, one of the two. So he's always been in that tier, right? He's always been if the entire province of Quebec is like, this kid's one of the best 07s, then that stays with you. The scouts know about it. Everybody knows about it well before you're in your draft season. And he's lived up to the expectations, right? The big ones, though, with Desnoyers, right, is that he was arguably the best player, complete player, in the Quebec League this year for the best team in the Quebec League, who went to the Memorial Cup and won the league championship. And he was, in my opinion, the best playoff performer in what it was listen, Moncton might have been beating everybody. They weren't beating people up like London did in the OHL playoffs, but listen, it was a great team. Moncton was a lot of fun, but the Quebec League playoffs, and I made a post, I kind of gave an update on the Quebec League contending situation sometime in like late February, early March to give people an idea. And that wondering if what kind of, and the reason why I did it was I got to find out what kind of road Desnoyers, Zanon, the center, for Rio-Noranda, and my favorite, what's his name? Carbonneau. Those are three elite Quebec League prospects. They're all first round caliber, obviously in a different tier. I would say Desnoyers in the top, Carbonneau in the second tier, and then Zanon maybe in like the bottom first round, early second round type tier. I had to see what these, and they were all on good teams. They were all teams with like kind of like contending aspirations, title aspirations. So I wanted to see how they perform in what I thought was going to be a meat grinder. Now, it wasn't as much of a meat, but postseason, listen, Carbonneau was gone, I think, after the first round, but Desnoyers was a stud. Now, goes to the Memorial Cup. He ain't doing anything offensively. He does nothing. But you got to add context to that. Apparently, he was hurt. Sometimes I don't really buy that excuse, though, because we all know everybody's hurt when the playoffs are around. Like, if he's got we got Ryan McDonough with like one working ankle, like dudes with freaking like Jeremy Roenick. Like, when was Jeremy Roenick ever healthy in the playoffs? You know what I'm saying? He always played hurt. Guys play hurt. So I don't really use that as an excuse. Like with Misa, like, oh, my back. Like, dude, his issues went beyond physical, like, ability stuff. But anyway, poor Misa just getting it from my end. But and again, I love the kid. I think he's a great, like I said, best goal scorer in the class, and he's going to go second or third overall. So just going to put that out there. So if scouts are worried about the Memorial Cup, it's valid. He did do okay because he has a 200-foot effort, energy, hands, like Hagen's. I would say more so than Hagen's. Angry, cross checks, slashes. He'll do that. You just didn't see him play as well as you did in the Quebec League playoffs. Moncton didn't win. There's no shame in that because no one was beating freaking London. London was just a machine. So do I have a problem with him in the top three? Yeah, kind of. Top five, like I said, I don't know. I don't know if I would put him ahead of the other guys. I don't know. Okay. And my main guys, Frondell, Hagens, Martone, Misa for forwards. Shave is number one. I don't know if I could really do that. And if you ask me why, I would say that it just there are certain games where he definitely was not. And again, I'm looking at it from the CHL standpoint, where it's easy to score goals. Not as physical, like Quebec League, they got rid of fighting. So I think that impacts the intensity level of a game, and if there's going to be retribution, you have to worry about that really. So I think that ties into the assessment. It should, at least. So and he did play for a great team. Now, the Ivan Halinka, we didn't really see him dominate. We saw him really. He was a critical piece to Canada winning, but not like Schaefer was probably the greatest defenseman in the history of the Halinka. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Steve, like with that, like in Desnoyers, in terms of the QMJHL? Like, there's been a bit of a narrative that obviously the QMJHL is the weakest of the CHL leagues. You think that's something to be taken into account when you're putting Desnoyers up against some of the others, like a Hagens, like a Frondell, like a Martone? Do you think that plays an effect?
Usually, maybe, but this year the Quebec League goaltending was great. The Quebec League, OHL goaltending was the worst out of the three, without a doubt.
Okay.
OHL goaltending has not been delivering. You go the drafts, like they say, the draft is spoken. Teams are not drafting OHL goalies high. They're going after look at the Russians that they're drafting 6'4" Russians.
Yeah.
So we could talk about Ivan Kovic, but to me it's Ravensburg and is the number one goalie out of the CHL, not Ivan Kovic. But so the Quebec League was very competitive this year. To answer your question, you have to ask, like, well, how would Desnoyers fare in an AHL environment or an NCAA environment, like all these other CHL kids leaving? I think he'd adapt. I really do. He'll put on added muscle. He's got a good frame. He's very competitive as well. So I don't think that's ever going to be a problem. And I really see it as him taking advantage. I think if he played in the OHL over a full season, he'd be, a 90,
pretty
100
similar.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next guy I want to talk about is he's tied with Hagens for my top choice. A big reason is something you said to us, plus me watching a little bit about him. I love everything about his game. In particular, I'm a huge fan. It's Anton Frondell, obviously, a player who's been playing against men, which I definitely consider when I look at prospects, and I feel like it's ignored consistently in like what the guy is able to do. It's like, okay, but he's playing against men and he's 17 years old versus the other guys who are playing against guys in his age group. But I do want to throw in the context of talking about Frondell, Victor Eklund, who I know you're high on as well. A lot of people have kind of, let's say the online scouting community, they seem to be higher on Eklund over Frondell. That doesn't sound right to me, though I do like Eklund as well, but I'd like that question maybe assessed to some reason as to why they would put him above. Because when I look at Frondell and I look at the size, the way he plays, like we didn't really know who to compare him to. I know everybody keeps saying Lundell. What is it?
Taves, Barkov, yeah.
Okay, I've heard the Barkov comparison. I've heard Lundell with better shooting. Me and Vasily, we both said
way more creative than Frondell. Frondell
or Lundell, you mean?
Oh, Lundell. Lundell. Yeah.
But it's the Finnish player.
We were saying Kopitar potentially, something like that.
Yeah.
So we're both extremely high on him. Like if we walk away with Frondell or Hagens, we're going to be over the moon. Like we consider that a humongous win. I mean, I'd be happy with any of these guys, to be honest. But the reality is, like, those are the when we look at the Flyers and what we think the Flyers need, like those are the guys that probably stick out to us.
Those types of centers, yeah.
Yes, a more goal scoring center that works amazing around the net, or the hopefully a Claude Giroux clone in Hagens. Like that's kind of another Giroux for us. That's what we kind of see. But with Frondell, yeah, if you could break him down for us, I don't think he's talked about enough. From what I've seen him go as high as 3. All of a sudden, Chicago apparently is very high on him. But I'd also like Eklund also assessed within that and to tell us, why people think Eklund is better than him by watching footage. Also, a player who's older than Frondell, which I noticed as well.
All right. So first of all, I'll tag it from the statistical standpoint. I'll tag it from the freaking eye test standpoint. From a statistical standpoint, it does not hold water. Frondell outproduced Eklund. He had a higher points per game average. It didn't start out that way. Eklund was definitely the better player, like statistically in the beginning. Now they both made the jump to the Djurgårdens A team, which is because they were relegated a couple of years ago. They're in the second division. We all watched Ted Lasso, so we all should know what relegation is, right? You get demoted, you get punished. It's almost like hockey purgatory. And the only way to get back into the top division and get all the fun stuff and be in the better arenas and play in front of more fans, I think make more money, is to win that championship, right? Like when you win the league championship in the second division, you get bumped up. So Djurgården has been rebuilding for a couple of years to get to that point. Now Djurgården being relegated, it's almost like the Dallas Cowboys playing in the freaking XFL or the Yankees playing in the freaking in AAA. Like they're the Stockholm team. They're the capital cities team. If you ever watch one of their games, it's phenomenal what they do. The show they put on, the singing, the flags, the chanting. It's it should be a bucket list thing for all hockey fans. But they were freaking relegated. Now, within the context of Frondell and Eklund, the J20 squad was building up as well. It's almost like a similar situation with the NHL. You want to make a Stanley Cup contender, you got to build up the farm system first. And so that team was loaded last year, this year. Well, last year, Frondell led the division play in points per game as a draft -1, more so than Eklund. Okay. But Eklund, maybe because he was older, he put more time in. He got bumped up to the A team before Frondell did. He spent a little bit more time there. And I think late last season, the 2024 season, Eklund was on a line with Linus Eriksson, a second-round pick of Florida, and some other schmo, some SHL schmo, Swedish schmo, no offense. And they were like the third line, but the team, they were like an energy line, but the team didn't advance. But it was still a good experience for Eklund. So you kind of knew heading into this year that Eklund was a lock to make your Gardens A team. Frondell, not so much. Although, if you follow the Swedish reports, if you read the online reports and you just use Google Translate, that the Swedish Federation, the writers, the media, the broadcasters, they loved Frondell. They viewed him as a Leo Carlson, like next type of star. I'm not going to put him on a Forsberg level, but every year there's always one Swedish kid that's going to be the top of the class, and they got to promote him. It's their job. But they really loved Frondell, and it always centered on his maturity, his work ethic on and off the ice, and his IQ, that he's a special, rare talent. That was the rhetoric coming out of Sweden after last season. But we still felt, well, you know what, he might play with the J20 because there's no room. And again, Djurgården desperately trying to qualify for the SHL, right? And so from the beginning, though, what happened? Frondell was hurt. He had a knee issue. He didn't play at the Helenka. He tried to play a couple of games at the Allsvenskan level, was playing like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes a game. Then he tried to play at the U20 Four Nations, played very well in one game. I have clips on it. I posted on Twitter way back when. And he was, then he called it quits. He was done. So he had that issue. While this is going on, what's Eklund doing? Freaking scoring, lighting it up, beautiful passes, etc. So naturally, the narrative would be, oh, this guy's in. Well, the narrative for a Swedish player, if it was a CHL player, probably different, but no offense to Vasily. But the narrative was, oh, well, this player is hurt and this player is not, and he's scoring. Oh my God, look at his stats. Let's rank him higher. And that's why in January, Central Scouting ranked Eklund #1 overall in the European pool. I saw that. I'm like, that's stupid, because Frondell, when he's healthy, and you're looking just straight up from the eye test, forget about the scoring, partial scoring crown he had the year prior. So then this narrative starts building that Frondell is problematic and he's got red flags, and that he's not that good. He didn't score 2 points a game in the G20. And I'm like, wait, just freaking wait, because if you watch the games, if you take notes, if you don't go shift by shift, if you go game by game, 4 lines by 4 lines, shift by shift, you'll see that he was playing well, just smart, positional, short distance type stuff. And again, he's recovering from a knee injury. So why can't we factor that in? Right? Why can't we factor that in?
I consider that when I saw his production kind of tailor off in the beginning and then ramp up.
So then, and again, I ignore the media, the other rankings. I care in the sense that I like to laugh at them when they do stuff like this, because it's like, dude, you're not watching the games, man. You might be watching 1 or 2 games. You're really not paying. If you're watching the games, you're not paying attention. And again, I'm like, there's no way scouts are seeing what these guys are seeing. There's no way scouts are like, oh, I know Central Scouting, they had their opinions, but again, fast forward to December, we're at the World Junior A Challenge, or the Junior A World Challenge, and a guy named Dave Dawson does the play-by-play there. It's in Canada. They have it, I think it was in Camrose, I think BC. And it's Canada West, Canada East, USHL All-Star team, and Sweden U18. They used to have Russia there, but everyone's mad at Russia, so they replaced them with the Swedes. So what the Swedes do is they send their U18 team there to play against U20 guys. There were drafted kids playing in this tournament. Will Zeller, who is the other guy? Austin Baker, right? He's an NTDP kid. And then you have the overages like Brendan McMorrow. And it is a quality tournament. The Canadian teams, because the BCHL and that whole issue with Junior A it's not as prominent as it used to be, but I care about USA versus freaking Sweden U18 because the U18s are playing up a level. They're playing against older kids. It's a pure U18 team versus a U20 team. To me, that's a big deal. I'm assuming scouts probably think the same way. And this guy, Dave Dawson, who I respect a lot, is a very good announcer, could not stop complimenting Frondell. I mean, they had other guys there. What was his name? Ivar Stenberg, the guys for next year's draft, Bjork. So there was a lot of praise to go around. It wasn't just Frondell. But that, in my opinion, was Frondell's kind of initial coming out party, right? He needed it for the media's sake, not my sake, because I love the kid. I wasn't changing my mind, but that was his way of saying don't count me out. You're in love with Misa. You're in love with Martone. You're in love with Schaefer. I'm here too. And not in a selfish kind of egotistical way. I felt like, he probably felt that he had something to prove. And boy, did he prove it at that tournament. Don't even look at the stats. I think it was like a point a game. Who cares? He was outstanding in that tournament. Then, World Juniors come. Eklund goes to the World Juniors. And Eklund is very impressive, right? But much like his play in the Allsvenskan, much like his play at the World Junior Summer Showcase, much like his play at the World Juniors, it's a lot of Northwest speed, aggressiveness, goal scoring, not a whole lot of passing, accurate passing, not a lot of high IQ stuff, okay? I have all the notes. I went game by game. If you subscribe to my Substack, I did a podcast after every day. And I wrote, and I actually began writing this stuff on the blog digitally in the summertime. They're like, hey, I'm noticing something about Eklund here. He's really not making smart plays. And I'm wondering, 1-on-4 freaking turnovers.
That's a big deal, though, IQ, right? Like if you see a player not actually making smart moves on the ice, that's at the NHL level, He's just going to get swarmed up.
But I'm looking at it at the prospect level. He could easily peel back, delay, poise. Wasn't seeing any of that. So now I'm like, all right, I got to keep an eye on this. Just like with Misa and his passing accuracy in the beginning of the season, I'm like, I got to keep an eye on this to see if this is a trend. And it actually did become a trend. Same thing with Eklund. It became a trend where he would make good passes in transition, not nearly as good as, they weren't nearly as good off the cycle and whatever. A lot of forced passes, turnovers, and then the possession changes. So, even still, though, he scored and people love Eklund's effort. They love his energy and he's feisty and he's got a quick stick and he has a nonstop motor and you can never stop it. And oh, by the way, he has near elite goal scoring skills or just finishing skills in general, right? Specifically with his shot, his wrist shot off the pass or slinging it in one motion, 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, circle, doesn't matter. I think he's got a very good, accurate wrist shot. But now we go into, now December ends, the World Junior's over. We go back to league play, and Frondell proceeds to destroy it. And not that he's going to destroy it, he destroys an adult league. He's averaging a point a game. And by season's end, what happened? Every U18 player who had ever played in the Allsvenskan did not score more or average more points per game than Anton Frondell. And that if you look at just draft year production, the only guy in the, salary cap era, right, post lockout, if you want to factor in the, overtimes and shootouts, all this other stuff, different game, the obstruction, was Elias Pettersson. He outproduced Pasternak. He outproduced William Nylander. To me, Jesper Bratt, that's it for me. That's all I need to hear. Bratt, Pasternak, William Nylander.
Yeah, huge.
So remember, it goes back to Bob McKenzie's early seasons, and I know I'm harping on poor guy, making margaritas. He made the mistake, and he was not quoting a scout when he did this. He made the mistake of saying that he thought Frondell had limited offensive skill or ceiling the freaking only a couple of months after he had that draft -1 scoring average title in the NORA division in the J20. I'm like, how could you say that? How could you say that a kid in the draft -1 led the league in points per game and it doesn't have high? So think about that double whammy. We got a double whammy. We got the league Allsvenskan U18 record, and we got the J20 scoring lead in his division, which it's a tough division, the NORA division. So that sold it for me, in addition to the eye test. Now, fast forward to the U18 Worlds, and I know people were waiting for Frondell to slip up, to make a mistake, to have a bad performance. I know it because I know how people are. This is what they do. They won't admit that they were wrong, and so they want to double down and say, "Oh, I just told you so." So Frondell went into the U Gardens playoffs, right? He scored an overtime winner in one game. They had a really tough series in the second round against Sodertalia. This is the best team in the league, dying to win relegation, but now they're in a fight. They're in a real dog fight to advance to the semifinal. And Sodertalia had their number. I tweeted it out. I said, "Freaking these your Gardens defensemen are going to get eaten alive in the NHL next season, in the SHL next season, because they are really, really sloppy moving the puck. Some of them are okay, but still. But Eklund, Frondell, and I want to say Marcus Kruger, the ex-Blocker, but I've been somebody else. Sometimes it was Linus Eriksson. They were on the third line as like a kid line, and they were together, or at least Frondell and Eklund were together that entire postseason. But they lose game 5 at home. Now they got to go to Sodertalia and win game 6 to stay alive, and they blow them out. It was like 8-3. Frondell had a goal and 2 assists, and then they ended up winning game 7. So although Frondell wasn't an elite playoff performer, and neither was Eklund, the fact is that this kid was playing in his mind, in Stockholm, the city of Stockholm's mind, game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. And he delivered. He earned his coach's trust. Now, I got asked a question. Like, this is going on in late April. I'd asked the question, you think Frondell's going to join Team Sweden for the U18 Worlds? I would say, I wouldn't. Why? He has nothing to prove. Go out on top, dude. He deserves a rest. He's got a knee. Let it heal, blah, blah, blah. So I'm watching the Djurgården wins the championship, right? It was a huge deal. But in the last couple of games of the Allsvenskan final, Frondell's ice time was limited significantly. Like he was barely playing, like almost like on a KHL rookie kind of like level, like 3-4 minutes. I'm like, what the frick happened? Is he in trouble?
Heard about that, yeah.
Context, right? Well, what happened was that, and I can't prove this, but I'm telling you, I know for a fact that this is exactly what I could sense that this is what would happen, is that Sweden wanted Frondell to play for them at the U18 Worlds, and they were saving his minutes. And the reason why I think that was because after that Sodertalia series, your Garden had a pretty easy run to the title. They weren't really overmatched. It wasn't really that close. I think they swept. It was either like Mora or Ike in the semifinal, and I forgot who they beat in the. So
they didn't need to rely on him that much, I guess.
They didn't need to rely on him. So I think it's either one of two things: that the Swedish Federation said we want Frondell. They asked him, and he was like, "Yeah, sure." Or Frondell said, "I want to go. I want to join my teammates there. I want to win gold." So I don't know what day of the week it was. He's lifting the freaking trophy. He's lifting the trophy. What time is it in Sweden when you lift up a championship trophy? Probably like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Hops on a plane, flies to Texas that same night, and is playing against Team USA the next day. Okay. How are we going to knock a kid
dedication
doing that, for making that choice? Well, I said, well, you know what? I still got to watch him. Watched every freaking minute of that shift. I even tweeted about it. His defense was impeccable. It was impeccable. He just wasn't creating all that offense. But at the same time, freaking Stenberg, his line mate, was a turnover machine. I love the kid. He's going to be a top 5, 10 pick next year. But he was a turnover machine, puck hog, right? Every time Frondell would make the play, just like the Higgins-Leonard situation. Frondell would make the play in the defensive zone. Stenberg would take the puck, turnover. It happened a lot. But Stenberg had more points. So you would say, oh, well, Stenberg played better than Frondell. Even still, I thought that the Team USA won the game. I thought Frondell had a very strong game, very high IQ type stuff. It just didn't really reflect in the box score. Plays the next game against Team USA in the semifinal. I went shift by shift. I wrote down every freaking thing he did. Okay. He made one turnover, one mistake, right? And Swedes ended up winning the game. Now, it was the Americans definitely played better, and Frondell didn't factor in, but he did make a nice play on a forecheck, forced a turnover, and then it led to a Stenberg goal. He didn't get an assist for it, but he rushed the defenseman. The defenseman turned it over. He passed it. It caromed out front to Stenberg, and he scored. So that, in a way, to me, that's an assist. If you pressure a defenseman into a turnover, that's an assist, but it didn't show up in the box score. Now Swedes go to the championship final against Canada. They get destroyed. The game was over before it started. I looked for Frondell's habits. I did not see any bad habits whatsoever, okay? Was he ineffective? Yes. Was he probably freaking exhausted? Double yes, okay?
So was the whole team, though, in terms of ineffectiveness.
So if you want to say, well, the Team Canada is the closest to an NHL team and he didn't play well. Dude, context freaking matters. But here's the best part. I saw a tweet that an NHL executive said that Frondell was a no-show at the U18 Worlds. And I'm telling that NHL executive, whoever you are, you're a GM, you're a scouting director, you're a freaking liar, and your evaluation freaking ability sucks, because he was completely effective. Any real scout, any real scouting director or executive would say, you know what? I really wanted more. And I wrote this in my evaluation. I wanted more from Frondell from an offensive standpoint, creativity, but his defense, his coverage, his play killing was perfect, near perfect. Okay. Positioning, covering for the slot, anticipating rims, like everything. So a real evaluator would say, you know what? He didn't have the best series, but you know what? But apparently this guy said he was a no-show.
But that's why you can't always judge the tournaments, right? Because it's such a small sample too. Like, how are you going to take that tournament and just be like, oh, he's a no-show, so now he's dropping down my board?
It's the dumbest shit. This is why we do this podcast. I'm not making stuff up. I'm not hiding anything. I'm not whatever. Like Frondell is my number 3. I know for a fact that he was slow out of the gate. Okay, but the narrative that he did not perform well is bullshit. It's complete bullshit, because he didn't perform well maybe in a certain measurable, but not overall. His IQ, again, this is something that has been really problematic in the way the draft is covered, because the media have no choice but to buy this, right? And again, I understand that we all want our prospects to be perfect, okay? But if you're going to talk about Frondell, you're going to talk about Hagens, you got to talk about Misa. You got to talk about Martone, right? You got to talk about Misa flipping a teddy bear. Tell me, what would happen if Matvey Michkov during his draft year was at an away game and they had a teddy bear toss, and as a joke, Michkov was flipping the teddy bears for charity, for sick kids, for the needy.
They'd be painting him as a
the teddy bears back in the crowd, and then got suspended for a game for it. How would the media react to that?
He's the villain. He's immature, you know?
Did that happen with Michael Misa? Was it even mentioned?
No, I didn't even know that.
That's what happened with Michael Misa. Michael Misa was suspended for a game in December for doing that. He did it twice. He did it with 2 stuffed animals. Flipped it into the crowd. Okay, that's a no-no. Everyone knows that. Here's the thing. So he gets suspended, and then what happens a couple of weeks later? Team Canada comes out with their World Junior list, and Misa isn't even invited to the camp. Now, isn't it reasonable to say that the staff saw that and was like, what's up with that? Why did he do that? And he even admitted, well, it was a lapse in judgment. Oh, well, we forgive you. Okay, fair enough. You can't have a double standard. You got to be like that with everybody. So, it's all fair about, again, Misa will be a phenomenal NHL player. It's all about the narrative, the context, and honesty. Okay, they're not politicians. I know the CHL needs the money and they're dying and everyone's worried about the kids leaving, but you got to be honest. You can't protect these kids. They sign their name on the dotted line. You got to evaluate, and you got to each and every one the same way. And what I noticed is the way that Frondell was covered, the way that Hagens was covered was not the same as the other kids. That's why, and again, this is why I did my deep dives. This is why I did the Misa point audit.
We have been seeing this like every year now, and
every draft.
Again, no offense to Facility, but like Canadian, and he brings this up himself. Canadian players are definitely given a benefit of the doubt that the other players are not.
The media here in terms of like the narrative towards Canadian players versus other players, it's completely crazy how much they'll favor a Canadian player, despite the fact that a player from elsewhere could be even more talented than them. It happens all the time. It's been happening for a decade, really. Like if you go back to coverage.
More than that. Okay, so Sidney Crosby in his draft year was listed at 5'11" and 180 pounds, right?
Yeah. This
was right out of the dead puck. The dead puck era had not been officially over yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we had because they signed the CBA. The dead puck era was alive and well. Devils won the Cup in 03. Tampa Bay Calgary was a heavy series. Yeah. Dead puck era was alive and well. Remember Czech Monik, who had like that one series with the Flyers, every game was 1-0.
Yeah, exactly.
It's close to it. But yet Crosby, and again, it's friggin' Sidney Crosby, right? Beautiful, right? Everything that he did was just phenomenal. But where was the size narrative? It wasn't there. It wasn't in the central scouting reports. It wasn't in the Hockey News draft.
Nobody cared. Yeah.
No mention of size, right? So I said, you got to be fair. And I get it. Like the more first round picks, the more ELCs that are signed by CHL prospects, the CHL gets a cut of that from the NHL. It's not necessarily their lifeblood, but it definitely helps. And there is there's an agreement. There's I think they call it a development fee. The problem is you can't really find it. It's not written anywhere, but it's kind of like industry knowledge that the CHL, really benefits when their players go to the NHL. So anyway, that's another topic for another time. I think Frondell, what teams see, even teams like Chicago with Bedard and Nazer, even teams like San Jose with Smith and Celebrini and Beasted, I'm sorry, having Beasted's really good two-way guy in a Stahl-esque kind of way. I think they could see Frondell as a 3C final piece. I don't care if we got to, overdraft him compared to the consensus, but then again, he was Central Scouting's #1 overall option. So it's not like he's that off the board. And the last part of it all is that he played wing almost the entire Allsvenskan season. So you could always move, just like with Misa, people are saying, well, if he goes to San Jose, we're going to move him to wing. Do the same with Frondell.
Yeah. Let's move forward. Let's move on to Jake O'Brien, and then we're going to do Brady Martin after him. So Jake O'Brien obviously has been, at least publicly, has been a riser. He clearly had an exceptional offensive season. Seems to be a high-end skilled power play specialist.
Yeah.
Been seeing him, as a guy who's being mocked to the Flyers quite a bit. Definitely piques my interest. But we're not looking for somebody who only succeeds on the power play. That's for sure. Even though we could use the power play help, that's not ideal for a top line player. But tell us about Jake O'Brien and what you think his ceiling is.
Yeah, he really is a great playmaker. I know when I did the breakdown of all his assists, I was surprised that the 5-on-5 A1s was low, lowest of that whole cohort. But if you watch him play, you see he makes some passes in traffic, definitely better than Martone in that regard. Well, he's a center, Martone's a wing. I know I said earlier that Martone is really good around the net. Like O'Brien really, really threads the needle. Now, his team had some injury issues in the beginning of the year, Brantford, and they had probably, I would say, outside of London, they had probably the best or one of the best center depths. They had really good prospects at the center position. And as a draft year guy, O'Brien was able to really solidify himself, not necessarily as the automatic 1C. It's just that they had Lardis was on that team. He scored 70 goals. I don't think they were line mates the whole season. They played in the power play together. Definitely weren't line mates in the playoffs. And then Lardis got hurt. I think he got knocked out. It actually was a pretty nasty series where they knocked out Lardis, and it created a lot. Was it Kitchener? I forgot who it was, but anyway, so O'Brien is a high scoring guy. The numbers are phenomenal, like, 90 plus points. I think close to 100 points in his draft season. He's thin. He's like 6'2", so he has the length. He just needs to put on the muscle. But I don't really see him as a perimeter player. I don't see him as a weak player, right? And remember that we got to be careful with this stuff because Pettersson was knocked for being rail thin, 6'2", 160 or whatever he was. And he's obviously, say whatever you want about Elias Pettersson, he's still a pretty damn good player. Yeah. And he's better than some of the guys that, were in that draft area, that range as well. So I think O'Brien has high point producing potential. The IQ, the skating is okay. It's pretty good. He's not like a afterburner. Like, he's not like, you know what I mean? He's more like deliberate, calculated. But I definitely see him adding muscle and becoming not just I want to say more engaged, because he does engage physically. Like, you see him like throw hit checks. The question you have to ask is he throwing these checks because it's his draft year? Are the checks he's throwing making sense? Is it separating somebody from the puck? And is he getting possession? And I think, like his tactics of the shoulder and the stick lift at the same time was pretty effective. But then again, it's the OHL. He's playing against younger competition. He's not in college. He's not in the AHL. So that's something you got to keep an eye on. I see him more of as like a long-term guy, but I don't think Jeff Carter, like, I don't think he was that thick when he was drafted in 2003. I'm sorry to put you on the spot by asking.
No, I don't think so.
No, he wasn't. He was pretty thin, but he did bulk up considerably, like in his sophomore year.
And he was known as a heavy when he went to the Kings too. Like, that was a heavy team.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan. I like him. I have him ranked. What I got him ranked? I have O'Brien 10. So I got him as a top 10. And
that's where he was, like, on publicly. Like,
Central Scouting shot him up to 4.
Right. Yes.
I don't know based off of what. Like, his second half was, like I said, the analytics community would come back and be like, well, what's up with all these secondary, like, where's primary
secondary assists? Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the last guy. I have so many players I want to cover. We'll have to probably like quick fire some of these other ones as we move to the rest of the draft.
That's fine. But I'll do my best. I know I get to 10.
No, it's all good. You went into detail of the players that we actually care about the most. But Brady Martin's a big one. This is a very controversial one online. This has obviously been like, he was never rated low, obviously. He was always kind of middle of the first round, maybe even upper middle of the first round, like around 10 to 15 range. Now he's going as high as 6, seen as high as 4.
A lot of mocks to the Flyers in certain respects. So
yes, and that was Craig Button that first broke that, and it kind of pissed everybody off. Everybody's pretty down on the idea. I have to be honest. It's not that I don't like him, but I don't know if that's exactly what the Flyers need, but I want you to correct me if I'm wrong about that. Not that they wouldn't benefit from a player like this. I think every team would. But right now what we see is like a play driving type of guy. I don't know if he's that guy.
Without a doubt.
You're gonna clear it up for us now, right? So Brady Martin, potential at 6. What can you tell us about Brady Martin? Can you tell us why his stock has skyrocketed so high?
Well, the stock
top line player, I guess.
The stock skyrocketed because of the U18s. Okay, we see this every year. His stock skyrocketed because of that tournament where you get the combination. You get the combination of the physicality. Now, again, I'm going to be honest with you. I watched this kid dating back to the Hlinka. No different. Like, what he did at the Hlinka was exactly what he did at the thing. The hitting is legit. It is a difference maker, but there's more to his game than hitting. I think he gets too wrapped up with the hitting sometimes, that he needs to tone it down. And I'm convinced that any NHL development staff, his AHL coach, training camp, dev types, all of them, I'll be like, dude, you could hit people, just not every shift 3-4 times. He's always looking to do that. And there's 2 concerns I have with that. Number one, he's going to get hurt. All right. Number one, now he's going to get hurt if he keeps doing it. He's going to piss a lot of people off. Not that that's a bad thing, but they're going to want retribution. And now you're taking penalties. You're going to NHL, AHL defenseman.
Target on the back, right?
If a 19, 20-year-old kid is showing up and drilling you. You know how much abuse the guys at the bench are going to give the player when he heads back? Like, oh, look at that, the freaking preschool and knock you out, like little things like that. So then you're like, oh, I'll show him. So I'm not saying that is guaranteed to happen, but I noticed every time I watched him play. Now, Sault Ste. Marie was I would say, mediocre team at best. They had good pieces. The goaltending was really bad. But Martin and the kid Hayes, the kid from Michigan, his older brother, I mean, he's Avery Hayes and Gavin Hayes are his brothers. So it's a hockey family, good prospects. And I thought that combo, that 1-2 punch, man, was a good for Sault Ste. Marie. What really sold me on Martin, like my notes, I had him at like 12, 13 from the very beginning of the season. I knew he was going to be a high pick. I loved him because I saw the playmaking in addition to, but during the playoffs, they were clearly overmatched, right? They were overmatched and his team had nothing, but every time he was on the ice, even in 1-on-3, we talk about the 1-on-3, 1-on-4 puck hogs, turnovers, he draws it back. He shows you that poise or that delay where he'll go east-west and lure, let's say, the two defenders at him, right? And they're poking, they're lunging at him. He's luring them. So he's backing towards the boards and then a saucer pass over traffic, cutter down the middle, scoring. I mean, that is high IQ stuff. And we know one guy that did it better than anybody in the history of the sport, but it's little things like that I love. And if you could do that as a power, nasty, physical center who really hurts people, then you got to chalk that up to IQ. You got to chalk it up to a kid with top line playmaking ability. So again, the postseason series, they got eliminated. It showed me that he could break the momentum by himself. He didn't really need help. He had the added bonus of Hayes, friggin' buzzsaw. You know what I mean? Kind of like he's a Willie Meckelin light, to be honest with you. I'm going to keep an eye on those two. I want to see where Hayes goes because I got him in the 80s, but I kind of want to push him up. But and he's also rail thin, you know. But I love Martin. I just think that people waited for him to have like a breakout performance. To me, the playoff series was the breakout performance, but you know, it went right into the U18 Worlds. He played great. Canada wins gold. Canadian media's all over it. And there's your raise.
So do you see him as a number one center in the NHL?
Was Mike Richards the number one center?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that your comparable for him, Richards?
Stylistically, yeah. He might be maybe a hair quicker.
Oh, but, well, that's actually a good
that's
thing.
interesting.
What was Richards' nickname?
Yeah.
I mean, I loved Mike Richards. We all
what was
did.
His nickname? For the audience that doesn't know.
I don't remember.
Cannon.
Cannon? Right. Yeah, no, yeah. He's right. I forgot
his
about that.
His nickname was Cannon.
Yeah. He was a
hitting
hitting machine.
Like Cannon because he's on the perimeter, right?
He's in the mix, right? And that's a good thing. You want to play.
I think that Mike Richards is definitely what the Flyers right now need. Mike Richards, right? Because they don't really have that. Rohonen, stylistically, he could be that kind of a guy, right? Heavy, strong on pucks, really good vision, good stick handling.
Brings the team into it with him, all that.
Yeah. Now he's not like classically big. I think he's only like 6 foot.
He's 6 foot.
Making a big
I mean, Richards was the same way though. Mike Richards was
also 5'10", 5'11". He
right.
wasn't a big guy.
So you know, the story about the farming. He's a farmer.
I mean, that means he's that explains
yeah.
explains the strength for sure.
Okay.
Farmers are like the strongest people.
Yeah. All right. And the Stahl brothers were farmers, right? All, even Jared, who didn't make it. Poor Jared. Yeah. How does that conversation? I wonder how that conversation goes.
Yeah, right.
Poor kid.
Well, what about giving out Christmas presents? You got 3 brothers who collectively have made like $150 million.
And you've been making like $80,000 a year.
I always wonder the convo with the Stahl brothers.
It well, but how does like, oh, Jared, thank you for this dartboard from.
I always wonder the convo at Stahl dinner, like back in the day where Eric he hit I actually know it was Mark who hit Jordan like right into the boards and concussed him or something.
Yeah.
And you're just like, how do you address that at dinner? Like, why'd you hit?
Yeah. But anyway,
you saw your own name on the back of the jersey, and you still hit me into the boards like that.
yeah, no, but I think that again, it's similar to Frondell, where like if you have the pieces in place already, it's a little bit different with the Flyers. It's different with the Bruins. Not really Nashville because they have a loaded pool and they have like, well, not really an elite. I mean, Surin is kind of like Martin. That's the thing about Yegor Surin is Yegor Surin plays exactly like Brady Martin, except he's way like nastier and maybe less but he's like Yegor Surin was a nut. He was a sick maniac last year in Russia, and he was like 23rd. But Brady Martin's now being talked as like a top 5 pick. So whatever. Yeah. But yeah, that's like stylistically, that's the kind of player we're looking at.
So let's say the Flyers have Hagens or Brady Martin.
Hagens. Yeah.
I think that's.
You have Martin kind of in that like. Do you have Martin above O'Brien? Like
no,
for the
they're
Flyers?
Together. No. I have Desnoyers above both of those two.
Okay. Yeah, the way I kind of see the Flyers walk away with 3 of the guys, it's either Hagens, Frondell, or Desnoyers.
Yeah.
I think those are in their wheelhouse. Any one of those 3. The one caveat I do want to throw, no, I do know about Carter Bear. I know about his injury, right? Yeah. I think he would probably be a top 8 pick in this draft without that concern, without the limit of the production, right? And we can talk about Carter Bear. But Radim Murka is a guy who intrigues me from a disruption standpoint to the draft because we talked about it earlier with Simashev, Reinbacher. Every year, a big defenseman who's two-way and can skate will make his way into the top 5, top 7. That is the one caveat where I look at a team like the Mammoth, right?
Yeah.
When I look at their roster, they don't necessarily need anything specifically. No. Their mind is what is best for our team. That's why I think Porter Martone is going to go there. But when I look at that, I go, are they going to is he going to leapfrog a lot of these guys and shock people and then get taken in like the top 5 all of a sudden? Because again, the rare combination of that size, the skating, the fact he had so much success coming over to this league. Do you see a guy like Murka potentially disrupting the top of the draft?
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is this, it depends on how scouts view his extra league of play. So when Murka's rise really happened after he left, what team was it? Was it Brno? I forgot which team he left. He left the team in the Czech extra league. He had a very good Hlinka in August. And then I think he made, if I recall correctly, he made the extra league A team, the adult league team out of camp. So he was in the opening night lineup, understandably so. Like I said, he had a very good Hlinka. He matched up against Canada. He was hitting, he was skating, he was scoring. I love the way he played at Hlinka. Problem is, he looked like a little bit of a fish out of water, right, against men. That you didn't really see that same confidence. You saw a lot of the puck was a grenade, and his ice time was incredibly limited. In the first game, he played a lot, but he made mistakes, and I think the coach was like, "All right, I'm not going to blow my freaking, I don't want to get into a hole early in the season because I want to play this kid. I'll give him a little bit of a taste." So that I think played into Murka's decision to leave the Extra Liga and head to the Dub and play for Seattle, which was a mediocre team, but they had room for a number 1, especially on the right side. And that's where he slotted in, and he was there, arguably one of the most impressive looking WHL defensemen from the time he got there. But it goes back to that question, like the scouts who are picking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, are they concerned about the Extra Liga play? Or they're like, hey, you know what? It was a learning experience, but we have a deep pool. We could stash him away. We could fix those issues. Clearly he wasn't ready, and we'll let him develop with us and we'll take care of him and whatsoever. Could he be like a difference making number 1, like a, let's say, think of any large big body number like a Seth Jones, like during his prime when he shut down Tampa. Like, can you see that? Yeah, absolutely, I can. It's just a matter of, the teams that are drafting especially the teams who need prospects, do you prioritize the Bostons, the Pittsburghs?
Do they draft for need? Yeah.
Well, I was also thinking about
Flyers,
Nashville, and they need a center,
Nashville,
but Nashville is a defensive farm. And I think when they look at a guy
and
like
they
that,
take their time with their defensemen.
yeah,
Poor Delgado, all their defensemen take forever, and they have them in Milwaukee for years. So that is something. But if you watch Barry, I watched Barry Trotz's press conference, and he was like, I'm not opposed to taking the best player available. I don't care how big he is. We like size, but I'm not opposed to doing this. It could be, like I said, he could just be feeding the the machine to kind of like, create a narrative.
Like we'll take Hagens if he's available, right?
Yeah, we
don't
always
think
see,
we
like, if you're looking at this draft, right, it's all these forwards at the top. Like, the chances of one defenseman potentially coming up into the mix, I feel like that's likely. Like, that always happens.
It happens every year, and it's
completely
completely unexpected, and it happens every year. And I look at Merca, even above Jackson Smith, and I look at him like Jackson Smith has got good size, but I'm like, Merca is a monster.
He's the big one, yeah.
Merca is more mature. He plays a safer. He's the guy that just snuffs people out. Like he
right.
Teams puts out fires. Like that's what you want. Smith does not put out fires. He creates fires.
Yeah.
This is kind of jumping off this topic point, Steve. But like in terms of sleepers in the first round, like just on your perspective,
we have one more top guy to talk about, which I forgot about. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Who do you think in terms of the sleepers, like in the first round potentially? Is there anybody that's like on your radar right now we should be aware of?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, because it's again like that the tier after my top tier is pretty open, because you have now you got to factor in the other defensemen. So, like for example, like Carbonneau, like Carbonneau, when you look at pro level traits or measurables, right? Speed, shot, size, strength, vision, like, decisiveness, confidence. He's got all that. And, again, it's like we say every year we do this, the top 10 players at the end of a draft class's career, when they're all gone, they're not always ranked 1 through 10.
No.
You're going to have a Jamie Benn in there.
Usually not ranked 1 through 10.
Have a Pavelski in there.
Yeah.
So I think that we got to kind of like prepare for a Pasternak, right? To be a late 20s guy. But as far as like rising, a team taking it like a Seneca type situation, I mean, I don't know, because like it would be shocking if a guy like, let's say, Reshny, or if a guy like maybe like Coots on Seattle, good centers, leapfrogged a Desnoyers and a Hagens. That I think is a little bit of overthinking, but sometimes scouts get it right. So one sleep. I mean, there's a lot of sleepers. So let's talk a little bit about the NTDP.
Can we pencil this real quick, because I want to segment this in with our 22nd and 31st pick conversation.
Okay, sure.
I just want to get to this one player, because if we don't talk about him, people are gonna be like, "Why the hell didn't you bring him up?"
Yeah,
Roger McQueen, right?
Oh, okay, yeah,
We didn't talk about him. There are so many fans that want him. I am not.
The size is a big deal, obviously.
But I am not sold on this player.
Yeah, nor am I. I got him ranked 27.
The injury is a big concern, despite what he said.
Is it just the injury, though?
Nope.
Right. Okay. That was when I looked into him, I'm like, I don't think he's a top 10 pick in this draft.
No. He didn't play like one.
Right. Even in his pre-draft year, just looking at his production, was nothing that impressive to think he's a top 10 player. And when he came back, he also wasn't. So can you quell the obsession with Roger McQueen? And then I want to get to Vasily's question, and we're going to tie that into the 22nd and 31st. Sorry, Vasily, to derail that. I just wanted to make sure we touched on Roger McQueen.
No worries.
Okay, so I have 3 red flags, right? There are 3 legit red flags. Nobody can deny them. They are legit red flags. Nothing personal, nothing off ice. Okay, this is all on ice related. Okay, so it's not like he's a bad person, or like Line flipped his coach the bird. This is all on ice related. So the first red flag, he had a back injury as late as last season, didn't get it addressed. It hampered his play to a degree. He came into this season, he played with it, and it cost him 3/4 of his draft year, right? Why is that a red flag? Because Kane Lindstrom had a back issue last year. I don't care that it was a different type of back issue. It was a back issue that cost him 3/4 of an entire draft season. And Kane Lindstrom, we heard all the reports coming out of Columbus. Oh, he's fine. He looked great at the con. Oh, everything's fine. Missed the entire regular season. Nobody wants that with the 4th overall pick, which is where Lindstrom went. And now people are talking about McQueen going in that same range. No way. There's just no way. Number 2, okay? He tried to come back from the injury, right? He tried to come back from the injury. He rested. He was out in it was like mid-October, early October, mid-October, maybe late. He came back, was ineffective. He looked good in spurts, right? Short distance stuff. Hands very quick, beautiful, right? Size, his vision, leadership, communication, size, all very nice, okay? Why aren't you dominating shifts? Why aren't you taking over games? And here's a third red flag, and it's a big one, okay? Speaking of taking over games, almost 70% of his 20 points came against the 2 worst teams in the league, okay? That is a major red flag. The analytics community is going to be like, wait a minute, what? That here's a guy that he was barely a point a game to begin with, okay? Barely a point a game. So I can understand if he's like Martone or Misa, he's off to a 2-point a game start. Dude, I am all willing to be on that. But so his first game of the year, he had 4 goals. I don't make any YouTube videos anymore. I used to always make highlight videos on YouTube. I made 2 this year from all the analysis that I did. One is McQueen's 4-goal game on opening night, and the other one is Misa's season. The Misa one is like 9 minutes. The McQueen one's like 2. But I'm like, all right, McQueen didn't have a good game. He had 4 goals. I think one was into an empty net. 3 of them, like one was a one-timer. The other 2 were like garbage goals in front. But he didn't really have like a good dominant-looking game for Brandon. Okay. And Brandon was like, dude, you're our number 1 center. You're our best player. But the fact that he only did the majority of his damage against Moose Jaw and Regina, literally the 2 worst teams in the league at season's end. So that, obviously they were bad then, they were bad now. That means that he scored only 30% of his points in like the other, whatever it was, like, 14 games. So those 3 to me, done. And again, the eye test, stats, the injury. I don't care. I don't care about the combine.
I already suspect that he was going to drop significantly.
Hey, one word, ibuprofen. Okay, I had degenerative disc. Now I know they say he had a broken thing and it healed. Dude, I had a horrible back injury that I suffered in Afghanistan, lifting up a box that I thought was a lot lighter than it was. So I have the degenerative disc disease, but because, freaking stubborn, I'm in the Army, I'm an officer, I got to do PT with my dudes, we got to do road marches. I was devouring painkillers, not like Motrin, like Advil, like over the counter stuff, because I had to kill the pain. And I was literally doing ruck marches, 12-mile ruck marches with 80 pounds on my back. And your commander's like, oh, how did it go? I'm like, it's fine. We had to do a circuit training. What's it called? CrossFit, where you throw in the medicine ball up against the wall.
That's fun.
Destroyed my back. But I was back in formation the next day running, 4 miles. So I don't really care about what goes on in the combine. I care about the long term. He's going to be taking cross checks. He's a net front presence guy. He's going to be taking cross checks to the back. You think the opposition is going to be like, oh, no, don't do that to McQueen. We want him to be okay. They will. Every team is going to target it. So now the concern is, what is he doing 5, 6, 7 years from now? What kind of condition is his back in? And you got to run the risk of, are you willing to assume the risk that, and for game 5 today of our 2-2 playoff series, no Roger McQueen, his back has been acting up again.
Yeah. When you could have had another option who didn't have that injury history too, right? So
yes.
If he played amazing,
different story.
With the back injury, I'd be way different. But he again, like I said, I mean, what am I going to do? I'm not going to cover for the kid. I can't lie.
No. I'm glad that you're saying this, because I think there's a lot of people who are just obsessed with the fact
fly
he's
is You think the Flyers are going to take that freaking risk?
No,
with
no,
Patrick.
There's
Not-
no way.
not with a high pick. No.
It's insane. It's if they go, you want to draft them late in the first round, fine. If you're like a I don't know, one of the teams that kept that pick with their contempt, Winnipeg, fine by all means. Montreal with their second first round pick, it was at 17. Go ahead and do it. That's a good pick. Not as the centerpiece of a draft class from a team that desperately needs a franchise center and a healthy franchise center. There's just no way.
What's your opinion on something like this? Let's say he falls to like you said, 17, 18, 19. The Flyers are there at 22.
Fine.
Should they
Do
Should they trade up for him?
Yeah, the upside's there. Do it, but again, not as because now the franchise that drafts him is going to have to be like, hey guys, this is our savior. This is the guy that's going to do it.
You know what I mean? Unknown with the injury.
Yeah,
for sure.
this was exactly my opinion.
Boston, Philly, Pittsburgh. I could see Dubas doing it, but then again,
it seems like a Dubas type of pick.
But remember, he had and I'm not kind of compare the situations, but he lost Amirov tragically, right? He passed away. So maybe Dubas might be a little like, I really, not that they knew what was going on with Amirov at the time, but maybe they did, who knows? But still, that was terrible. So maybe he'd be more, you know what? I'm sticking to the consensus and, or the common sense.
I think there's enough good players in this draft that he is going
thank you.
He's going to fall. I've been saying this for a while.
This is a center-heavy draft.
Talk about the narrative that we talked about. We didn't mention that earlier. I think the narrative always stems around, is there a Connor McDavid, a Connor Bedard in a draft, a Macklin Celebrini? If there isn't in the beginning where they've all identified that number one guy, they call it a weak draft. Every single time. They go off the narrative, but the majority of drafts are average. Even the Patrick draft with Hischier, when you look back at that, there was a McDavid. Look at
Cale Makar. That's a generational talent.
But if you look, if you
17
look at the
was and I was part of that. I talk about evolving as a evaluator. It's we learned our lesson from 17.
Right. And Jason Robertson, right? And all these guys in that draft, they're all average. There's the exceptional drafts. The rest of them are pretty much average.
Like 99, 99, 2012. From a forward standpoint, 96, those are like, there
was I forget what year.
And then you get those like generational,
but
that was 12. That was 12. Yeah, he's one of the best players from that. That's how
Then you get those generational drafts like 2003 where it's just so much depth, right?
But those are outliers, right? It's like you have the McDavid draft, right, and the Bedard draft, and
there's like 7 or 8 all time.
To their credit, though, there does seem to be this weird trend when that guy is available. There does seem to be like a slew of other guys available, almost like they all peak together.
Yeah.
But for the most part, this seems to me like an average to somewhat an above average draft if you're considering forwards. Maybe lighter on D, but heavier on goaltender, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let's get into it and let's keep the context of Vasily's question in mind. And we've been going slow. Not that I want to like speed you up, but
that's fine.
We haven't gotten to the other stuff.
We're 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. The 22 range is a big pick. We talked about potential of McQueen being there. You mentioned Cole Reshny. He's like my dream pick at 22. I don't think he'll be available then. Right. He was like in some mock drafts and all that. But who should the Flyers look at 22? And then we'll talk about 31, 32, whatever. I assume it'll be 31 at this point. I don't know.
Okay, so it all really depends on what how much they want to exploit the center strength, right?
Probably a lot, to be honest.
And the goalie strength. So I do think they're definitely going to draft a goalie with one of their picks just to play it safe, right? Because you had this Kolosov issue. So I think they want to say, hey, you know what? We can't have this. You can't now. Zavragin, Bjarnason, fine, but this is
you need more.
Yeah,
you need more.
And
always.
Now, do you say, hey, why waste a high second on a goalie when there's going to be a bunch available in the third? We could use one on the. But again, so you had a strong Quebec League goalie crop, a strong Dub goalie crop. You always have a strong Russian goalie crop. The Finnish one, especially the overages, are pretty good, and Sweden's always pretty always average. So it's a very good draft for goalies. I think maybe Ravensbergen, because of his size, is gonna be the first one to go. I don't think that's gonna start the goalie.
I don't think so either.
No, because he's gonna go earlier than a lot of the other goalies, so I don't think it's gonna start like you said.
Maybe.
Like
I don't think he's like that.
I think he's a beginning of the second round.
Yeah, that's what I mean, though.
Type of guy.
Yeah, but again, a team is within their right to use a late first round pick on him.
Sure.
But I think if the Flyers decide to, let's just look at it from let's do BPA. Let's try to do BPA and address a need at the same time, right? So that like wherever we fall, which players would be a pure BPA, right? But also help us address a need. So, I haven't been quiet about it, the whole power play quarterback thing. The problem with this draft is around 22, there really isn't going to be a like pure power play quarterback. You're going to have Cam Reed, who I love,
right?
From Kitchener. You're going to have Logan Hensler, who I love, a kid who played college this year. You're going to probably have Henry Brustovich, right, with London. He was a huge, impact guy for them at the thing. I don't know if Kashawn Aitchison, he's going to be with Smith and Mertka in that upper tier.
Probably going to be, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Be drafted by then, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So you're not gonna see. There really aren't like that many elite. Well,
I think the guys you did mention though, Reed and Hensler, those seem like very intriguing options at 22.
And though although they have point producing potential, you're looking more at like a Cam York. Like they're producing not Hensler in college, but I think Hensler is really good defensively with his skating and his size. You could have him be like a Brady Shea, right?
Okay.
He'll get his 30 points. He'll get his 30 points by skating and good first pass, but not like, an end-to-end type of rushing like a Zeev Boyum or a, like power play quarterbacking like a Dickinson or a Perek.
What do you think, Steve? Like, do you think a Fiddler is a reach there at 22?
Yeah.
He's confident. I like his confidence. I really do. He played for a thin team. I like him a lot. I don't think he'd be a reach. And I actually think that he's actually has probably more point producing potential than a guy like Hensler or maybe.
And he's a big boy too. So that's 6'4". So
like Hensler will go coast to coast. Reed usually stops short. You know what I mean? He's more of like active in the offensive zone more than creating it himself. But Fiddler is an alpha. He's an alpha. He's a confident kid. He's a clean puck manager. We saw it at every level. So I wouldn't have a problem with that. And really, I mean, the other defensemen are kind of like him, left or right side. I mean, Aitchison is the real. Aitchison and Smith to me are the real, like they are different. They're unique. I'm not high on Smith. I'm definitely higher on Aitchison.
Okay.
Because Aitchison could score goals.
He's hitter.
Got swagger, and he is a devastating hitter. And I like the fact that he played on a loaded team with a whole bunch of NHL prospects, and he didn't care. He was a good teammate, stood up for his teammates, but he's good. He's really good. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the one that goes before Mertka.
I've seen that too, that he's like another guy who could
rise up the board. Yeah.
But he's a big trash talker. He has a lot of enemies, so you got to worry about that to a degree.
Sure.
One other guy, Steve, like just on the topic of 22 and even like potentially 31 for that.
Yeah,
matter,
we can
like,
bucket it together. It's
because they're kind of similar, but like I've seen Nesbitt getting mocked to the Flyers as well. What are your thoughts? Like, do you think that's a guy where, hey, you get it? Maybe you get like a Martone at 6. Do you think they go for like a Nesbitt to get that center need filled?
Yeah. And I mentioned Nesbitt, McKinney, Horkoff.
Coots, Gastrin are two guys.
Gastrin's a no. They'll be in that range. I think that with Nesbitt, what I really liked about him was now Windsor had an embarrassing reverse sweep. Like they were up 3-0 on Kitchener, and then they blew it.
Not good.
Big reason why they blew it though was their two best players, Greentree and Protus, the NHL draft picks. They weren't cutting it, but Nesbitt was really doing his best to help that team avoid the reverse sweep. So I like him. He grew on me. I wasn't high on him in the beginning. I had him like in the 60s. but he really grew on me. And I pushed him into the first round, and that playoff performance really helped. So you got playmaking, you got size, you got face-offs. So even if they go like a Hagens with their first pick, and he's on the like smaller side,
and you get a Nesbitt to kind of go with the size pick, that makes sense.
Yeah, right? and he's not like a two-way stopper or anything. And he also had a lot of secondary. He was a secondary assist merchant too, though. That's the only thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of looked at
he's a good passer though. He's a very good passer.
Hoping it. Yeah, I heard that about it. I heard, I have
Borkov too.
Malcolm Spence is out there. He's not a center, but
boy, one of the best defensive, arguably the best defensive winger in the class. Okay. Just a nuisance.
I think like really after grabbing a center, the Flyers are like, hopefully like in their mind, they'd be like, we either want to grab a center or a defenseman, but if the best player available is a winger, we're going to grab him.
Yeah, I don't
think we can make up for it in the second.
Right? I don't think you guys have a player like him in your system. I mean, Bump, Sulku, Chernik, and then all the right wings, like where you're getting a combination
with that defensive type of prowess,
size, shutdown ability, clutch scoring. He matched up against Misa. Like he's an irritator. He's a play killer. Really good. The stats are good for what he does, his job. He's a winner. He scored a golden goal for Canada at, I believe it was the Helenka. He was a huge reason why they came back and beat Team USA at the U18 Worlds last year. So huge Spence fan. I have him at, I want to say like 13 or 12 or 13.
Okay. Yeah. So he probably, I kind of suspected he wouldn't be there. I was hoping a guy like Coots would be there. Kindle is interesting because of production, but
energy, IQ, athleticism, speed. Yeah. Just not big.
Yeah. And I suspect Lyndon Lakovic will not be available in that range too. I suspect just because he's so big. Offensive upside.
He's kind of like a Martone, like more playmaker than finisher. Like everything is like IQ related. He had a little bit of an injury to deal with this year. I'm pretty high on him. I have him at, I believe, 9.
Okay.
I'm very high on him.
And okay, that's great. So he probably won't be there. Bill Zanin, you mentioned him. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
You mentioned him earlier.
No, I don't know. Yeah,
it might be Zanon. Probably.
Yeah, Zanon's a no. I don't know. But he is a all energy. Now I seen him listed as a wing, but he played a lot of center. But he's kind of like an Eklund or a Bear in that Moet is always running hot. Good size, really good puck handler. I think he's the one with the awkward stride, but good kid. He seems like a good kid at least, and pretty good shots. He could score from distance. So I like him. He too was low numbers with the playmaking and the 5-on-5 8-1 type stuff. A lot of power play. It was like power play merchant. He's into that same category as O'Brien, but definitely like ideal measurables.
Where do you think Ryabkin is going?
Oh, dude,
that's an interesting one.
I mean,
he seems like a second round pick because of what has happened.
Yeah,
all the out of shape, work
ethic. Right? I mean, like staying in shape is part of commitment. It's part of commitment.
Do you think
so he might drop even lower?
If you're the Flyers with all the picks they have, for example, do you think it's worth taking a flyer on him with the second?
Or is he even
I got him ranked
like one of the late seconds, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, we had a similar player, Hobanov. He had I think he went to like the Bahamas and got Hep C.
Oh, Jesus.
Like that. This was like back in like a couple of years ago.
Doesn't seem like a good time, but
he was the Russian #1 center for that year group. I forgot which one it was. It was like the 01 or the 2000, and he never really recovered. Then he went to the Q and put up big numbers, but his always thing was pace, motor, effort.
Couldn't keep up. Yeah,
but God-given skill up the yin yang, but.
Yeah,
and Ryabkin was basically left Russia to fix his draft stock because the Russian coach was like, dude, you're overweight and I'm not going to play you. You're out of shape. So he goes to Muskegon. Muskegon is a loaded team.
And he's still
really good. He's slow to kind of get, but he's dirty hits, undisciplined, not moving his feet. That really carried on to, but he's
going to drop.
He's going to drop. He should drop. I mean, he was like 5'11", like 210.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely
combine.
gonna drop. I think when teams see a lack of commitment, that's like a
You
huge
Huge
red flag.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like the
Huge.
biggest red flag you could have.
Huge.
Most of these guys are all super committed, so that's the whole thing, right?
Right.
It's like, why don't I pick a guy that's in shape? So
Yeah. At least he'll play, fourth line in the NHL, even if you won't make your top six potential or top nine potential,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because
It's a huge
I mean, it
swing.
could
I'm
be
just interested, but
it could be a situation. Ever see the movie The Great White Hype?
I have not.
no,
All
I
right,
have not.
so basically Denzel Washington, what's his name? Damon
Oh,
Wayans, Denzel Washington. Damon
okay.
Wayans, it's a comedy. Damon Wayans is a boxer, right?
Okay.
He's the world champion, but he's out of shape. He's getting lazy, whatever. So like a Don King kind of character wants to create like a big title fight. So they try to find this like white guy. It's Peter Berg.
Yeah.
And they're like, Peter Berg is like training. He's like Conor McGregor. He's like crazy, right? And meanwhile, like there's like a scene where Damon Wayans is like running. They show him jogging, like, and our boy's training. So they show footage of him jogging, but he's running after an ice cream truck. He's running after an ice cream truck. So like the whole fight is like, oh, he's gonna kill him, and then basically this out of shape, bloated, lazy Damon Wayans knocks out the stud in shape, white boy, and with one punch, and it's over, and that's it. So I'm saying Ryabkin could be like, hey, doubt me, dude.
Well,
He was
chip
my
on the
top
shoulder
three.
type
He
of
was in my
thing.
top
Yeah.
three to start the season.
yeah.
Which is crazy to
So,
think about, right?
yeah.
On the
He
fly.
produced like Mitch Corby, but almost
Well,
like Mitch Corby and Demidov. He was in
that's
that
why I feel
conversation.
like a team. There must be a team in the second round that's just going to think like, "Hey, let's take a flyer on this guy because this, the potential's there. Let's try to fix whatever's happening." Chances are you never fix it, but you never know.
No, you never know. I mean, they're still young.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's definitely not a lottery talent anymore, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, he's somebody I think the Flyers could take a flyer on, though, with 4 second-round picks.
that's what I mean, right?
They can afford to take the risk.
Yeah.
And so the way I kind of see it is the second round, I think the Flyers will walk away with the goalie. Probably one of the top 3 goalies.
Most likely.
That typically that is what you do when you have an excess of second round picks, right? You take a goalie. They are a risk to a degree, but you can afford to take it.
You can afford to take it, yeah.
Right, exactly. So I don't want to go too much into goalies. We can all kind of agree it's going to happen, but the second round's pretty open. Anybody else, because we're above 3 hours right now.
That's okay.
Anybody we should look at in the second round that we should be excited about. And again, guys, we will do a post-draft episode where we will analyze the specific players the Flyers take. So look forward to that. But,
Yeah, that too, and maybe too. What we can do for the post draft is like if there's any questions or players you guys want to know about, we'll take them beforehand. We can ask Steve.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you think the Flyers should look at for second round? Anybody in there that you think is like a gem potentially, but you can't see him going in the first round? They have the 36th, the 40th, the 45th, and the 48. So they can really destroy that.
They can distribute.
They can dominate that territory right there.
Yeah, I mean the WHL goalies and the Quebec League goalies, Malash, Burkhood, they all were like either they were number ones throughout the season, they took a job away from somebody, or just played really, really well. Like Ivan Kovic, if he's there in the second round, you want to take a gamble on him? Fine, okay. But he was inconsistent this season, didn't have a good postseason, was actually pulled as the starter in favor of, was it Gillespie, his name? They ended up losing the series. And remember, this is Martone. So we watched it's the Oshawa series. Oshawa was good. But you give up 7-6 goals a game. Rebound controls all out of control.
Wasn't great in the World Juniors either. So
yeah, but he had a good Helenka and he had a good U18 Worlds, but everything in between was inconsistent. Ravensburgen was same thing, little inconsistent, but he's got the length and the quickness, and you definitely could see. I would say I'd put him ahead of Bjarnason in terms of like draft year ability. So listen, if the Flyers are willing to draft Bjarnason as high as they did, why wouldn't they be willing to draft this kid?
Ravensburgen,
Yeah.
Now
I think they could.
The Russian though, Andrianov, was a hero for was Krasnaya Armia, right? Pretty good team, but still young. This kid is like, and I'm only using it because I'm old. That's a Flyer podcast, but this kid handles the puck like Hextall. This kid can freaking bang it off the glass. He loves handling the puck, but on top of that, you get phenomenal acrobatic. Now he's not big though. I don't think he's big. What is he at? Andrianov is 6'1", 207.
It's not small.
That's still decent.
That's in this day and age, you could say it's close to
average,
acceptable.
Yeah.
Actually, you say it is acceptable, whereas 6'2" and above is ideal.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like what a Carter Hart was like a 6'1", 6'2".
Yeah.
Dustin Wolf just was called a runner up, and he was like 5'11". Listen, people are going to talk about like Ivan Kovic being like Dustin Wolf. Dustin Wolf was absolutely brilliant.
Completely different story.
Everett in his draft year. He was the undisputed wire-to-wire #1. I think he led the league in wins. He was in the top categories of save percentage, etc. Central Scouting was not bullish on him. He ended up barely making the draft. He was drafted, I think, in the 7th round. Okay. Ivan Kovic did not have a season like Dustin Wolf did in 2019. Now, the thing is, goes back to what we said earlier. Dustin Wolf is a California kid. Ivan Kovic is a highly regarded Ontario kid. So that might explain
the narrative together.
Yeah. So I think the Flyers will probably look to draft a defenseman in that territory. Any defenseman in that range that you think the Flyers should consider?
Where in the second round?
Second round.
Listen, you got this is where I think you got the Russian kids. One kid, listen, power play quarterback. The name sounds familiar. He's a Russian, so you know that they know about him. Is Gonchar, Sergei Gonchar's nephew, I think, not son. But this kid played for Stane Lisi, right? The Foxes, and he is all puck rushing. I don't know if he had any KHL experience. I think he spent the whole year in the MHL. So you still got to wonder. He might be.
The Flyers, they're open to drafting the Russians, as we've seen the last couple seasons. So.
Now, if you want to go like a defensive shutdown guy, you got a bunch, right? You got Rombach, the lefty, the kid out of the USHL. You have Carlos Handel, who played in the Quebec League. We see that the Flyers keep drafting defensemen out of the Quebec League, so they must know about him. But I think. If they decide, remember they lost those 2 righties, right? I think Zanetti too. Did they?
Zanetti's gone.
Was not
all right.
signed
So Zanetti's a lefty, and then the 2 righties, Southern and Mann. I told you, Mann was
we had a feeling.
Yeah. So maybe they want to replenish them, but just aim higher with higher upside. But Gill's pretty good. It looks like he's developing nicely. So you have the other Russian defenseman Nikita Tyurin, who's very good. Magomed Sultanov. Again, I'm saying Russians because they like him. On the Swedish side, you have Multi Voss, who's a big physical kid. He's like a poor man's Mertka, although maybe not as skilled. You have the Carl Anborn is another one. Okay. And then you have the NTDP kids. You got freaking Amico and Tretaway and Maceo Phillips. Like these guys were supposed to be potential first-round picks, but didn't really work out. So they might want to swing high on those because they all have size and they could skate.
In terms, Steve, of just like guys that might be later rounds that you have, obviously seen a lot of and just think that, okay, might be pegged for like a 3rd, 4th round type of thing, but worth a swing or worth maybe, taking a chance on, like anybody that comes to mind on your end?
Yeah, a lot of OHL kids like Tyler Hopkins, big physical, sturdy center. He fits that Rohonen mold. Playing for Kingston. I loved now that he's small, or smallish, but Tanner Lamb on Kitchener. He was elevated to the top line with Karamiris. Ellenis, Luke Ellenis, the Greek, by the way.
Ellenis with Ellenis. There we go.
Yeah. And Luca Romano. So you had the Asian, the Italian, and the Greek all on one line. It was like a nice.
Sounds like a fun line there.
But they helped. The reverse sweep with Kitchener was a lot, mostly because of them. So I think Lamb's going to get a lot of attention. You look at guys like Kvasnichka on the NTDP, who's just all motor, all skill and motor. He was elevated to the top line. You have a lot of these Quebec League playmakers like Nobert and Moran, and then really the Swedes. Gustav Hillstrom, Novotny, a wing. Ice Wozniak might even slip a little bit. These guys are more second round, so I'm sorry if I'm mentioning guys high in the second round. I know you're talking about middle to late round stuff. No
worries at all. This is going good.
Guys are going to fall, right?
Of course, yeah.
So I know that we have guys ranked in the 2nd, 3rd round, but I think again, it ties into the depth of the draft. We didn't get a great Russian crop. We didn't get a great Finnish crop.
When, Steven, your opinion, like obviously there's a point where some of the talent level falls off and the depth starts to fall off, and you only have certain guys and you're kind of taking swings as a team. Like, when do you think that starts to happen in this draft? Probably like round 3 or after round 3, or is there still depth beyond that?
That's the one thing. You're probably not going to get a lot of high end skilled. Like, okay, it's like it all depends on size. So you might get smaller guys like Bruno Osmanis or Michael Eriksson, right? The kids from Europe. They might slip because they're small and they're European, but they got a lot of skill. Like, they played at the D1A World Championship or the World Juniors. You saw what they can do. But the drop off doesn't happen with goalies. The goalie is you are gonna get a good goalie, I think, in round 4 and 5. And I'm just saying that because it happens every year. Like, it's that deep. But I do think there is a significant skill drop off, like LJ Mooney, right? Like, he's like 5'7", really good playmaker for the NTDP, but he's 5'7", 5'8". 5'8" if he's
gonna drop like the 5th round or something.
Well, that made me think about somebody else, Cameron Schmidt, who I know was ranked in the first round. He is very small and he doesn't weigh much. And I hear he also is not an amazing skater for a smaller guy. But again, 78 points in 61 games, 40 goals.
Maybe a guy in the 2nd round, right?
Well, I was thinking like maybe that's somebody the Flyers could take a swing at, at 40 or something like that. I can't see him going in the first round. I think guys like Yamamoto have kind of ruined that,
Yeah.
Well, but you got the other side where you got DeBrincat, who's an Iron Man,
right?
Consistent,
but also dropped significantly, right? DeBrincat. Yeah. Who probably shouldn't.
They just never ranked him high. I had him in the first round. Everyone else was,
So I kind of see him, well, I see him in that range though, the 32nd to the 45 range, as a guy who's a high producer but has a question mark, right? So if he doesn't pan out, you kind of lose it. You're not going to take a big swing on him. You took your swing,
but it's later on, obviously.
Right, because he has a high upside. Like, do you see him as like kind of early 2nd round pick guy?
I mean, the IQ stuff is concerning. He's a little, he could be infuriating with his, but he's go and shoot. So
it sounds like, maybe even late 2nd round pick type of guy.
Well, listen, Benak is the other one too. The kid from the USHL who just was great at the Helenka and really had a strong season in the USHL, but he's 5'7". Now, if you ask me who I'd rather have, Benak or Schmidt, I'd rather have Benak.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
He's a center and he's a smarter player.
Yeah, and I feel like that really comes into play when you're not talking about like the top guys in the draft, because a lot of times
IQ is important.
Yeah, because a lot of times these guys are not developed, and as you wait 2-3 years, their game changes. Like, there's a reason Jason Robertson didn't go in the first round, but he evolved into being Jason Robertson we know today.
Thing you can't teach on the ice, knowing where to go, how to read the play. That's one thing that you really can't develop very easily anyways. So.
I just feel like when teams get into like the 3rd to 5th round, they are searching for a Noah Cates. They are searching for that brilliant guy who can play middle 6 role and is a guaranteed pro. Maybe will never score 70, 80 points in the league, but they don't care because he could be part of a playoff team.
You can always fix like a skating problem, or they don't, not physical enough in certain areas, but like being able to think the game, know where to go, know how to, react in certain situations on the ice. Like, that's something you really cannot always teach players. So I think that's totally the point, right?
Yes. All right, we should probably call it at this. We're at least on the clock. It says 3.5 hours. So
yes,
we're gonna do, again, a reminder. We're gonna do a post-draft episode. What do we say? It was July 8th or 10th?
Yeah,
something like that. So the week after July 4th. I'll remind people on the podcast. So again, not the July 4th week, but the following week, we're gonna do the follow-up episode, and we will dig into the players who were selected. That will be focused, and we will go through every one of the picks. And I'm sure Steve will have awesome insight on that, and hopefully the Flyers knock it out of the park. They've had last year's draft was a little more contentious, but obviously the Michkov draft was like resounding success from top to bottom, at least the initial reaction.
I've liked the Flair drafts, I'll be honest. Like, I think with him as the AGM kind of running the drafts, even under Fletcher, I think they've had some decent drafts.
Yes. So. I mean, they took Tyson Forrester, and he's been a huge win.
Hey, Howard Chuck loved him, man. That still bodes true today. The late Dale Howard Chuck.
And one of my favorite players, man. Man, did I love. He was
awesome.
All right, Steve, please let people know where they can follow you. They definitely should pay for your Substack.
They should pay a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and check out your content. And again, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. Hopefully, everybody's still with us. This was a long one. If you got to watch it in shifts, totally understand.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to put some timestamps for you all as well. So
Thank you, Vasily. That would be amazing.
Nah, just I appreciate the invite. You guys are great. It's really, listen, this is the only time I'm ever really doing a video stream.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the reason why I'm to be honest with you, a lot of the reason why I lock my stuff up and I'm private is because I have daughters now. They're older, and my sense of humor, I'm very tongue in cheek. I like to kind of crack jokes. I treat the draft process seriously, but I like to make jokes. I like to find humor in everything.
yeah, let's have a fun time
So
when we analyze.
unfortunately, that offends a lot of people in this day and age, and some people rubs the wrong way. So I don't want to put my daughters in a position where
Smart
you know what I'm
move.
saying? Like, because you know how it is online. Like, it's you just
one thing gets taken out of context is the biggest deal.
or like what you are online isn't really what you are in real life.
Yeah, that too.
So it's like I'm very vulgar. I'm vulgar in real life and on social media, but I'm trying to stop that. But like it's like just in general, I could be maybe more crude, and so I lock it up. It's for a specific audience.
Sure.
Right? Not like Spinal Tap, where it was like mostly young boys, right?
Yeah. Never change, Steve. That's all I have to say. Yeah. Again, I found you through your podcast, and I love the attitude. So
yeah, it's who I am. I'm not gonna stop being who I am.
Don't. So where can people follow you? I guess like make sure they know where.
Try, at the Draft Analyst on Twitter and Substack. Okay. Everything's locked up on Substack. So the only way to get access to the stuff is it's $5 a month or $50 a year. But I'm into long form coverage. It's not it's a newsletter, but it's long form. So like I'll do like for example, the Flyers draft recap was like 3,500 words.
Okay. Wow.
Like I do long projects. If that's what you're into, fine. And my draft report will be released in a couple of days. About 250 pages, and I cover everything: team, draft, farm system, rankings, farm system overview, prospect depth chart, draft lottery history, all that good stuff.
It's amazing. All right, Vasily, anything you want to add to our audience?
Yeah, so obviously with the draft coming up next week, I'm gonna do my own like mock draft. It's not gonna be at the level of Steve and his great work, but I'm gonna try.
As long as you do one, that's all that matters.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to get one out next week before the draft, so that'll be fun. So keep an eye out on Flyers.
Better prepared now.
Yeah, now I'm better prepared. Also,
hey, listen, no, I don't think like everybody else. Okay, fair. The draft is not gonna say, "Oh, Steve spoke. Let's listen to him." No, like it's going to go the way it's going to go.
Our audience thinks that way.
Yeah, but also keep an eye out on Flyers Nitty the whole next week, just because there's going to be not just my article, but there's going to be a ton of draft content in general from Jamie and our other writers as well. So please visit the website, everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Check us out and make sure to anticipate Vasily's article that's going to come out. And we will talk about what we're going to do for the draft. We will figure that out later because we haven't yet. Also, just want to remind everybody to like and subscribe. Hopefully you made it this far, but if you have, please like, subscribe, give us a follow, all that stuff. Amazing support so far, so thank you all so much. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes and make sure to give us a rating and a follow. Again, these are the best way to support our podcast, and we truly appreciate the support. Also, shout out to Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment need. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company. Make sure you get the best claim possible. And shout out to SportsSpider.com. They are our partners. They aggregate content from all over the web and put our stuff at the top. Make sure to check out SportsBetter.com. The link is in the description of the audio and video versions of this show. Thank you again for listening. We love you. And remember, always stay